Welcome to episode 2 of the Triple Takeover Toycast, a new regular podcast about Transformers and occasionally other vintage and related toy lines from the 80s and 90s. Your hosts are Transformers toy writers and photographers, Liam from Toybox Soapbox.
Hello.
And M.A.S. from Transformers Square One.
Hey.
And my name is Sixo, but more on that later, hey? Anyway, we're here for episode 2, and the topic for today is Holy Grails. That being toys that we're eager to make part of our collection for whatever reason, and perhaps a bit beyond that, just what specifically makes a Holy Grail to begin with. Anyway, before we get to all of that, how are you both doing?
Really good, thank you. It's great to see you both.
And you? And you indeed. M.A.S., how are you?
I'm doing great, cheers. How are you doing, Sixo?
Not too bad, thanks. Yeah, I've been, tidying up a bit, the old display and stuff recently, and trying to think about my Holy Grails and what they are. So that's been quite fun, actually.
It was a great choice of topic.
Yeah, it really was. A bit inspired. Obviously, we put it out, didn't we, on Twitter to say, what are people's Holy Grails and all of that. But I think before that, actually, we tweeted to say, what should episode 2 be about? And I was really interested to see so many replies and so much enthusiasm for episode 1. That's been great. But secondly, really, to see a lot of people quite excited for what we're going to do next as well. So I guess.
Yeah, I have to big shout out to everyone who's been kind enough to give feedback. And, it's been really, really positive comments. And for us, like some people have noticed, it was just like we were, down the pub having a chat. And while that was what made it easy for us to just chat, at the same time, you always do wonder, is anyone really interested in what people are talking about at the pub? So it's been really nice to hear that people have actually responded to that. And
I've found it really heartwarming. I have to say, it's been great to kind of just read that so many people have just enjoyed listening to the three of us just sitting down and just chatting rubbish. Do you know what I mean? About toys from 30, 40 years ago. It's just brilliant. But it's obviously, struck a bit of a chord with a few people. So, as I say, some great suggestions as well, I think, about some of the topics coming up. And obviously, we chose Holy Grails for that one. So that's been kind of fun. I can't wait to hear what you all have to say.
I realized this week, actually, that when looking up what to say for this one, because I wanted to make sure I'd had a good think about this and I didn't just want to give the answers on the fly, I realized that I had actually written something about this in the past. And,
for an article?
Yeah, and more than once. And then I was looking through for example, the TF Source articles where they were, and I realized that one of the other writers, Matt, had also written about this. So it's a topic that comes really naturally to collectors. I mean, as collectors, you've always got goals. So it's I think it's something that everyone thinks about at some point, and this is probably a really common conversation between toy collectors.
Well, I guess it's a good place to start off, because one thing that I was thinking about, first of all, before we get to what our individual grails are, or all of that kind of stuff, is what makes a grail to begin with. Because I guess in most people's minds, that they probably have in mind something that's unobtainable in some way, even though some of them now actually probably are obtainable, or like there may be grails that actually you previously had that now actually you have in your collections or whatever else. But I don't think it has to be just one set of criteria. And I guess, again, reading some of the kind of responses on Twitter, what struck me is the different criteria that people kind of have, to judge what is a grail for them personally. I'm not going to kind of give it all away now, because obviously that's the discussion. But for me, it was really interesting, because I suppose initially going into it, I had in mind that people might be quite set of what a Holy Grail was to them, just like the most expensive, most unobtainable item, the rarest thing or whatever. But it really seems like it's not that, actually, in a lot of cases.
No, it seems to be quite circumstantial as well. For example, there are things that are unobtainable because they're just not there. They've not been seen or found, or there's just not enough of them. There's unobtainable because maybe you just weren't quick enough off the mark, or because of finances, because of location. Speaking from personal experience, I'm trying to get things to this island. But it's a very, very wide topic. And I remember actually Matt, who wrote one article about this, did have a very good point that the grail to one person is something that another collector wouldn't, look at twice. So I think that's personal.
That's it. It's really personal. And I guess that for me is what's so interesting about it, because, sometimes we forget, don't we, that everybody has their own experience of this hobby, and actually what is meaningful or kind of, significant to one person is going to be entirely insignificant to someone else, you know. And I think that's why this topic in particular kind of really resonates for me a little bit, just because of how personal it is. And I think there is really something quite interesting about sharing your own very individual, kind of what you see as like really kind of the bar to be achieved, if that makes sense. It really kind of says a lot about you as a collector and kind of where you aspire to be, because it's not just what you pick up every day. It's not just like, oh yeah, I picked this up from the local Smiths or whatever. It's something that actually you've really got to kind of strive to achieve. It's not just there for the taking, is it? So it's kind of where do you see your collection going or whatever. Does that sort of make sense?
Does, but I can definitely think of a few examples when just finding something at the store it was supposed to be at was a remarkable achievement, and it just felt like that was a piece of the puzzle. And I'm not talking about a particularly rare toy. I think I could have just popped online and put in an order, but I'd said to myself, this is something I'm going to find in the shop. This is something
there is something special about seeing it on the shelf, isn't there?
Oh, definitely. Did you have something in mind with that one?
Well, you know what? If I say bisque again, I'm just going to get it from you twice.
The lobster.
Yeah, that was one of them.
I think Sixo was right last week when you said you were being sponsored by Bisque. That's the only reason you can
podcast mascot.
Well, this is Iceland, one of Iceland's most popular dishes, and exports lobster, langoustine. So I'm in the right place. But yeah, it was actually virtually anything that ends up in the main line that you believe that should be available in Smiths or Toys R Us at the time, or even Sainsbury's. I mean, how many times do we pop onto maybe a UK-based TFW thread and people are saying that they're finding the toys that have just been released in Sainsbury's, and I will just immediately mark on my list, right, I'm going to this one, this one, this one, and that one, and I am going to find this figure. And then when you do finally come across it at this branch, which maybe is completely out of your way, it feels like a major achievement. I wouldn't say a grail, but I can understand why some people, retail toys, exactly. Retail toys can qualify under circumstances.
I've got to be honest, because I've never really had that to some degree. I mean, obviously, I know what it feels like to buy toys from shops, of course, but because of the nature of a lot of the stuff that I collect, it's all online, really. Do you know what I mean? So I've never had that kind of like scouring the toy aisles, like, elbowing some small child out of the way because you want to get like the last whatever. Do you know what I mean? On the shelf.
As if any small child comes up to your elbow.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I've never done it. I can think of some much smaller collectors than me. Do you know what I mean? That
Did you need them in the head as well?
Do you get them to do the elbowing for you?
Well, exactly. You got to have a team around you, don't you? So,
you send Kit out front.
Actually, I think the last Transformer I bought in a shop, other than ones for my boy, other than for him, I think the last one I bought for me was that Primus Generation 2 Last Night Primus. The blue and orange one, which I got from a Toys R Us near to me. And I remember the young lady on the checkout just kind of giving me this kind of look, and maybe it's just my own paranoia or whatever, but sometimes it's all fine, and then other times you get that look that's just like, why are you buying this? Do you know what I mean? And I definitely got that sense of that, like, really? Do you know what I mean? But I
love that that's started to go away now. I love that I can waltz into a toy shop and buy a toy for me, and it's just accepted now. It's just okay for.
It used to be worse. It used to be way worse. I remember buying Beast Wars toys back when they were first out, and obviously I was a lot younger, but still, I actually got a comment once from a guy in one shop who was just like, "Dude, what?" I can't remember his exact words, but he basically took the mickey, and he was the guy working there on the till. Do you know what I mean? And it was a bit like, oh, all right,
Was he a bit just like, dude, it's a man and a pig? Was
exactly.
Kind of the response you got.
It's man
in pig. Yeah, for man in pig. Gotta love it. Vote man in pig. But
that can be our first t-shirt. There we go.
There we go. We'll get that made up for TFN. But I think it's a really interesting one, because I did notice actually on Twitter that a lot of people were kind of suggesting retail toys as grails, and I think that's fair enough. But also I think because of the availability of a lot of them now and the exclusive nature of lots of the toys that are out, whether it's some of the select stuff or even some of the the stuff through Pulse or whatever, it's just I don't know, Liam, you probably know more about that than anybody, but it does seem like a lot of those toys kind of almost achieve Grail status as soon as they're announced, no?
Yeah, it's because they go out of stock so fast. They're so, I don't know if they do them in limited numbers or what, but they're just sort of thrown out there and then people rush onto them and they're gone. And they then become so difficult to obtain because the prices just skyrocket afterwards. And it's always really sort of obscure characters, but it's characters that, like a section of the fandom really want.
It's mad. It's mad. I really noticed it with the Autobot Alliance, the Prowl and Ironhide 2-pack, because I got asked by Toy Hacks to do some pictures for them. So I was like, okay, well, I'll pick it up. And when I looked on eBay or wherever to kind of see, I was absolutely stunned by the prices of that thing and what it's going for. I just think it's just incredible, really. Do you know what I mean? For a toy that's just been released, a mainline toy, I think it's madness. But
I was watching the Conehead pack, the Dirge and Ramjet. I was watching the value triple on eBay as I was watching the Amazon tracking on where mine was.
Do you reckon this is something quite new to our fandom? Because, like the Macross fandom, when new collector's items come out, it's almost like being there when concert tickets are released and you just have to be the one to get that order in before the website crashes. And it's like, if you miss that moment that it goes live, that's it. There's no second round, there's no release on another continent, that's just it. It's sold out, and that's your chance of getting that item.
I think it's maybe more new in mainline stuff, definitely. I mean, it has happened before in Transformers. Like, I always think of, like the Bape, Masterpiece Bape toys as one example of something that is, that is a grail for a lot of people, because when they go live, you have to be in the shop to buy them initially. And then, of course, they go up online, from people that have been there in the clothing store buying them. And they go up for, horrendous prices often. So it's like scouring through Yahoo Japan or whatever, just trying to find the one listing that, like, someone's not being a total PI staker with it. Do you know what I mean? It's
a very modern thing, that, though, isn't it? Because it happens with, like, trainers as well. Like with Jordan trainers, they sell out instantly, and there's that mad scramble for people to get them, and then you can't get them. And there's as much people buying them for the aftermarket as anything else.
It really is. And I think that's exactly the problem, is that, I mean, it's not just scalpers. It is scalpers, but it's also just regular people. I guess they're scalpers as well, maybe. I don't know. But it depends on your definition of the whole
amateur
thing,
scalpers.
But amateur scalpers.
Semi-pro.
Hoping to go professional. But no, I think, it is a lot of that. It's really interesting. But actually, here's one for you. And we're kind of getting a little bit off topic, but I think it is interesting. With I heard something recently. Someone was speculating that some third parties, one in particular, the third party, there's a lot of people think of them, fans toys, that actually short stock.
I love that build-up you did to just try and conceal the identity, and then you just say it.
In the end, I was like, I got nothing to lose here. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they're going to send people around to my house or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
I was waiting for him to say Ace Toys.
Oh, man, no. No, not them. Yeah. I'm suddenly reminded of that quote from Red Dwarf. Maybe Ace Hole. Kind of sounds more appropriate. Anyway, fans toys. No, I don't know if this is true or not, but I did see some speculation that maybe they were kind of short stocking some listings, that they were kind of purposely sending out very limited numbers purely to kind of create that buzz that, oh my God, it's the latest fans toys, whatever, it's going to go out of stock, only to then suddenly release more stock later on at inflated prices and whatever else. I don't know if that's true. So that's like a total caveat on my part. So anybody that's listening to that, please don't go away like that's what fans toys do, because I have no knowledge if they do that or not.
I was just going to say, it's definitely funny because, like, you think about sort of when STC comes around and, like, the scramble, everybody's waiting to pre-order, and it's kind of but it's not just Transformers. You had that in Star Wars with Marvel Legends, and it just seems to have become a cultural thing that we all have, like with PlayStation and stuff like that now, and you cannot get that, and everyone's waiting for the exact moment it comes out and rushing to the shop, and it's just, we seem to have that now where they've kind of lost that patience almost. But it's because everything goes out of stock.
Yeah. I guess it's not great, really, is it? Because it creates a lot of, I see a lot of, I was going to say misery. Maybe that's a little bit hyperbolic. But, I see a lot of, like, unhappiness about this, like, unavailability of a lot of recent items online. And fair enough. I can completely understand that. And I guess I just don't, I don't know how long that can last. You know what I mean? Before people kind of get a bit fed up with it. Maybe it will last. I don't know.
You can see that with generations at the minute, because they do stuff like with Blue Streak and Thrust, for example, where they made them. I think in America they're like Walgreens exclusives or somewhere like that. So when you're in England or Britain or wherever, you're sort of having to go online at the exact time. Like to get Blue Streak, I was in Scotland on holiday and I was having to furiously refresh my phone trying to just get one. And it was just crashing constantly because everyone's doing the same. And it's just this strange sort of...
That sounds like a relaxing holiday.
I was looking at a lock at the time, so that was quite nice.
By Loch Ness, just refreshing your phone, trying to get the latest Earthrise Blue Streak.
Just going back to the topic of this whole culture of wanting to be there first to get that item on release. I mean, we've been conditioned for that. For those of us who have grown up chasing a vintage hobby where this stuff just wasn't in the public eye anymore. In the late 90s, early 2000s maybe, and you've experienced what it's like to try to find toys which have basically disappeared from retail, disappeared into lofts or charity shops, and you realize that difficulty is something that you could potentially avoid by being there on release. It's completely different now. Like even the way that the Walmart reissues have been bought up and marketed and stocked is different to the way that the first round of Hasbro commemorative G1 reissues were. You know, I remember walking into Toys R Us and seeing loads of them, and at that time there was no compulsion from me to say I need to buy all of these now. You know, and I was already a G1 collector. I was already collecting reissues at the time, but now I just know that if I had access to Walmart, I'd make damn sure there was not a thing I left unbought. I don't mean multiples, but just like the things that I wanted.
But like that Devastator, that Walmart Devastator was a good example, wasn't it? Because I know, like, I got caught out and then was like, oh, that'll be around. You know, that's something that I'm interested in.
I'm still caught out.
There'll be plenty of that. And I was going to say, you've still not found one, have you?
No. And I regret it because I remember seeing one at TFN for 65 quid. And I thought, I'll get it later, and never did.
But that's the thing. You see, that is exactly the thing that a lot of us did with the first round of reissues, and even eHobby and stuff like that. We were like, I'll get it later. I don't want it right now. And I remember with
Shining
some
Magnus?
of these. Say again? Yeah, Shining Magnus. I will not forget how retailers were telling me that they just simply couldn't shift them, and nobody wanted them at the time. I mean, how things change. And now I knew that. Okay, I'm going to collect these Walmart reissues. Maybe, for example, there is one or two that I didn't want as much as the others, but I just thought, well, there's probably going to come a time where I'm going to want this, so I'm just going to buy it now. And that's just me admitting that I am affected by this same mentality and culture, and it's very different to how it was a mere 5-10 years ago.
Do you think, though, I mean, it's interesting because I agree with what you're saying. At the same time, you do also see people who treat other stuff as maybe something that's going to be valuable, but I kind of see it and I'm like, I don't know what makes you think that that's going to pick up in value. Do you know what I mean? Like someone the other day I saw, and they just, you know, honestly were asking me, should they open their, what's it called, Gigawatt? You know, the collaborative Gigawatt. Should I open it or should I keep it sealed? And I was like, well, ultimately it's your toy. You know, you do what you want with it. But I remember thinking, I don't know what kind of makes you think that it's suddenly going to uptick in value. Do you know what I mean? To any great degree, anyway. I mean, equally, you could always buy a second one or whatever if you really wanted to. But I mean, ultimately, I might be wrong. Do you know what I mean? It might suddenly go stratospheric for all we know. You know, but you do see people, you know, sometimes buying everyday sort of like mainline stuff now, keeping it sealed. And that's been a trend for years as well.
Yeah, speculation, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you know what's going to suddenly become more desirable than others, you know?
It's always the stuff nobody wanted the first time. It's always the stuff at the end of a wave, or, you know, the stuff that was always on discount and everybody left it. And that's always the stuff you then cannot get because the prices skyrocket.
But you can see how this stuff can become a grail for somebody. If this is the line that they collect, if this is the kind of toy that they buy, even if it's retail, brand new, available online to everybody, you know, who gets there on time, and then there's that one that you can't get because it's been and gone, I can completely see why that can become a grail, especially if it's the one thing that's missing from a complete collection. Or it's the one that you wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, and actually, that was a note that I made when I was kind of thinking through for today's, chat. Was that actually a lot of it surely is going to come down to your personal. It's not so much what's the rarest thing; it's for you personally. What are you missing from your collection, right? Like if you've got a lineup, and I think that's where a lot of people are at with with War for Cybertron or whatever. Like that Prowl and Ironhide is a good example because you're not going to go after like Optimus, Trailbreaker, Sunstreaker, all these guys, and then not have Prowl and Ironhide. Right? Like they're two very prominent parts of the G1 cast. So in that regard, they kind of become more of a priority and whatever else. It's all down to people's individual collections. I know for me, I had great fun getting a lot of G1 stuff, one subline at a time, because I found that was a really kind of like mentally for me, kind of like ticking the boxes. But I found that was quite a nice way to be like, okay, well, I'm going to get all 3 monster bots. Do you know what I mean? And then it gave me something to kind of look for each time. And then that one, you get 2, and that third monster bot or whatever, that would become the kind of focus, the grail, as it were. Until it's not anymore and you move on to the next thing, you've got it. But I can see how that happens, and I think that probably is a large part of what plays into people's kind of personal grails, if that makes sense.
And I was just going to say, I think that's it now, isn't it? With grails, it shifts. It shifts onto whatever the next thing is. Once you've got something, it then becomes whatever the next thing you want is. Like we were saying earlier about sort of the picking up of the exclusive generation stuff. It's like you'll see people lusting after, say, the blue streak, and then as soon as they've got it, it's like it's great. It goes to one side, and they move straight onto something else. I do this exactly the same, and that the next thing is a grail.
Is that a grail then? Is that truly a holy grail, Batman? If it's something that you're like, or is that just I want that, and then you get it, and then you move on to the next thing? Is there a distinction there, or is it all one and the same?
There is, but I think it's sort of almost replaced it in that sense, because we get so much stuff now, and we've got such access to stuff. I don't think the sort of the holy grails in the old sense, like when you're younger, it's different. There's one toy you always want, and then 20 years later you get it. That's like the holy grail.
Yeah.
But then once you've sort of achieved that, you move on to sort of what the next thing is, and then you become, I don't know, sort of like when they did Rotorstorm, for example. You're like, wow, it's a new version of this character. I've wanted it for years, and then you get it, and then you just sort of move on again. It's kind of like you say, it's not really a grail, I suppose.
But I think if you also consider at what point someone comes into the collecting hobby, with a lot of retail lines, they've got this period of time where they're available, and then there's that period of time where they're just no longer the newest thing, and it's probably the moment that is almost the best time to get them because they're not the hottest thing right now, and people are moving on to the next thing. But then there's this patch where they've almost just disappeared from the consciousness, and I'm not talking a matter of months, and it could be years. But they've been in stores, and then they've been secondhand, and then they've just gone. And the people who wanted them have them now, and they're in a bit more of a settled space, and you don't see them anywhere. If someone comes into the collecting hobby at that point, and they've always wanted a particular figure done in a particular way, like someone just realized they wanted maybe a Generations something or a Masterpiece something, but it's out of stores, it's not being reissued, it's in collections, there's already a vibrant collector scene where people are still collecting this hot thing, but that's gone. They could be waiting a very long time before an opportunity comes up to get that.
The Transformers will return after these messages.
I've got this mad concept for you right here. Listen, and I hope my maths doesn't go completely wrong here. Back in, let's say the year 2000, 1999.
I don't think I can remember that far back.
No.
If I had wanted a particular... Let's talk about something which is often mentioned as a grail, a Diaclone figure, a pre-transformer of ancient history from decades ago that's super tough to find, only available in Japan. That toy would have been, 15 years out of market?
Yeah.
And that felt like an eternity ago. And where do I find this toy? Yeah. And now, someone coming into the hobby today, 15 years ago was 2005. Imagine a toy that was at retail in 2005 that is now a little bit tricky to find. It's almost like that same thing on repeat, but to us it just doesn't seem at all the same. And of course the internet has completely changed how people find these stories. It's not at all comparable, but just in terms of time scale and dropping into a hobby at a particular point in your life.
It never hurts to look back at how long it's been. Do you know, and I'm struggling to sort of explain that, but I think, you made the good point when you're like, well, I always kind of think about the end of G1. Do you know what I mean? Whether that was like 1990 or 93 or whatever, and then the fact that actually it was only, he says, 7 years until 2000 and all of that. And actually, here's one: it was only 10 years between the end of G1 and then the first masterpiece. That's probably the example. 10 years, and actually, since the first masterpiece, that's been 18 years now. So it's been much longer.
Time has lost the meaning.
Exactly. Time is all over the place in that regard, because to me it seems like an eternity between the end of G1 and MP1. That just seems like a chasm of time and experience and everything. But if you told me that actually it's almost twice as much time since now and MP1, it blows my mind a little bit. But I think Masterpiece is probably a good example about what you were saying too, Maz, because I speak to tons of new collectors who have seen pictures of MPs online or whatever, often because they kind of look like what people wanted as a kid. You know what I mean? They're kind of the picture perfect. They remind them of the cartoon or whatever, and they come into the hobby like, okay, where can I get these? Where can I get MP Soundwave? Where can I get, those toys that have, what was MP Soundwave? Was that 2013?
That was 2000 and
I want to say 2013.
Yes,
I might be
slightly off thinking of where I was living at the time, and I got that toy approximately 6 or 7 months after it had come out. Yeah,
but 8-year-old toy, but still 8 years that's gone by since that toy was released, and it's just not available anymore. Like, I'm sure.
Do you remember when it was Grail status, because it fell into that little gap before it had ever been reissued? And remember when it was with MP12 Sideswipe, when it had come and gone, and Masterpiece was really going in this new direction, and people were buying this for like £130, just sitting there refreshing the TFW sales page until someone had decided that they didn't want it. It's like just pounce on it. Yeah. And then, of course, the reissues come, and suddenly none of these masterpieces seem quite as ridiculously difficult to get as they did at that just short moment after they had come and gone from online stores. There was definitely a thing that was...
I guess it just depends about everything that's going on, doesn't it? I mean, coming back to some of the e-hobby stuff like Shining Magnus and, Fireguts Gojinrai and stuff like that you and I, Maz, have talked about these a few times. I mean, Shining Magnus was one. I remember when I first picked it up, and, I won't say what it was or whatever, but I remember at the time you were like, oh, I'm surprised by, I think I told you how much it was going to cost me. And
I don't sugarcoat it. I think I called you an idiot.
I think you did. But now what I paid is an absolute fraction of what it now goes for.
Right. And I bought it a few months after you and paid loads more.
and I remember saying at the time, like, actually, this is a really good price. Do you know what I mean? And you wouldn't have it because, and I don't say that in a, kind of, look at,
you're absolutely right. I hadn't realised how. No,
it's unless you're watching that stuff, it suddenly creeps up. And I think some of those e-hobby, releases are a great example of like you just have to be there at the right time. And that's a good example because they almost become Grails because you're like, oh, well, I was watching that and I kind of had in the back of my mind that I might get it one day, and now suddenly it's unobtainable. Do you know what I mean? Suddenly I either wouldn't be willing to pay the price that I would have to own it, or it's just can't be found anymore because everybody's hoovered it up.
I really think the thing about Grails as well is if I am looking for a toy like Shining Magnus today and someone else is looking for it today as well, that mental aspect of having owned it before stops it ever being a Grail for me, even though I might struggle and have the same desire to own it as someone else, exactly the same way. We end up paying the same. We look for it for the same amount of time. For that person, it's a Grail because they've never owned it. But for me, I knew I owned it 10, 15 years ago, and I sold it for a certain amount. I know what it's like to own it, but I really, really wanted it again for my collection, and I struggled to get it, and I paid a lot more than I wanted to. And even though it was an achievement and I felt great getting it, it never felt like the achievement of a Grail. It almost felt like correcting a mistake. But I think not having something before is also a huge aspect to seeing something as a Grail.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's the first time experience, isn't it?
It's the main driver, isn't it? That's it. You want it. You want to know what you want to experience it.
It's the unknown, yeah.
But do you guys think so, that the change in the way the market is now more accessible? Because do you think that's changed the way we look at Grails and things like that? Because before the 2000s, you didn't have eBay and stuff like that. So when you were looking for something, it was, almost unobtainable. You just had to find it or know people, or it was a much harder process and longer. Whereas now, sort of since, I don't know, so the early 2000s, you can, if you have the money, you can just go on eBay and stuff is at your fingertips. If you have the money, it's there. I don't know if that changes things.
It does change things. I would add to that, though, and say that it's not just eBay, and it's not just the fact that you can, if you've got the money or whatever, you can just go and buy stuff. I think it's also the amount of information that's out there now as well, because there are toys that actually, I was going to talk a bit about this. This was going to be one of my things, and say about actually one of my grails was Beast War's second Galvatron, which I'd always wanted. And I say that because I remember seeing it for the first time when I was a teenager. Logging on to the internet as we did in those days, pre-phones and all of that malarkey. I think I was at school actually, and you got 20 minutes of computer time or whatever at lunchtime, where you had to do the whole and get on the internet and all of that. And there were always the guys in the computer room, 4 guys that were always in one chat room together. Do you know what I mean? And it was guys, just go outside.
The one who always had the giant trackball.
Yeah, definitely. Trackball, man, that really is a thing.
They've seen it on Tomorrow's World or Bad Influence, and it was this is the future. We're all going to have these.
Tomorrow's World and Bad Influence. Okay, hang on, I just need to really get my bearings here. That's a bit too much of a blast from the past.
Next, we'll be talking about.
Do you know what? I have to mention this. I have to mention this. You mentioned Bad Influence. A colleague of mine just recently posted a tweet, and he got a reply from Violet Berlin. And
really?
I just messaged him immediately, and I was like, "You just got a reply from Violet Berlin," and it was such a big deal to him as well. And I think if ever we're in danger of alienating a segment of our listeners, that was it.
They're all logging off now. They're just
they're all googling Andy Crane. That's what they'll all be doing next.
Beast War second Galvatron for me. I remember, and this sounds mad now because everything is so prolific all over the internet now. Prototypes, everything. But I, at the time, obviously Japanese Transformers, a lot of that was just a relative unknown to me. Do you know what I mean? Just complete mystery. And I can't even remember where it was or what website, but I remember seeing grey resin prototype pictures of Beast War second Galvatron, and it blew my mind. I just was in complete awe of this dragon mode, everything. It just seemed so desirable, everything. And I didn't own that toy until literally a couple of months ago. Do you know what I mean? But that for me was almost this mystery around it, because there were only 2 pictures of the thing, in one in each of its main modes, and this grey resin prototype. And it wasn't like there was this abundance of information or whatever at the time. It was just a couple of sites really. And but now it's so different, because now you see a new toy and immediately it's everywhere. Everybody's retweeting it, posting it. Within a day you'll get more pictures of it, and they'll do a video on it as well. And then Prime versus Prime will get it in hand, and that'll be it. Do you know what I mean? And it's just kind of a different experience now. So I think I do think that it is something about eBay and what have you, but I just think that the internet generally has changed the kind of experience, if you like, and the kind of hunger for information. Does that sort of resonate? Or
yeah, I think also it's really helped. I think people probably categorize something as a grail if you were going to do it in a completely cold, feelingless, without feeling. Just say, well, that is a figure that I have now researched and realized is of a particular type of rarity and is special because of all of this information that exists on the internet that somebody has provided, because now everyone knows about it. So that is an acceptable item for me to categorize as a grail. It's going to be hard for me to get, never had it, it's going to cost a lot, lots of people want it. It is clearly documented as being low numbers or difficult to find. That's a grail. So I think in a way it's probably helped people categorize their grails.
I was listening to a guy talking about it's about wrestling, but he was talking about wrestling belt collectors, like the title belts and stuff, and sort of the high values they go for. But he said there's only really 5 people in the world that collect them because of the price. So he says when one comes up for sale, it's not like everyone piles on. It's like if other people have got them, they all just sort of stand back, so the value goes up.
I was just going to say there was something that actually we were talking about briefly the other day, which I thought was really interesting, Maz, about your kind of your work, if you like, what you've done in the past, which is, obviously write about a lot of pre-Transformers toys and things like that. But the kind of dichotomy, I suppose, of writing about this stuff because you're interested in it, but then also raising awareness of those toys at the same time, so that actually they become more desirable for, a wider audience, which in a way also, and in your case, has led to people approaching you with some of these toys to say, hey, actually I've got these, do you want them? But then, the kind of flip side being that other people are looking for them as well. And I guess that is, I don't know, I don't really know what the conclusion is to that, but it's interesting.
I think it reminds me of when I first got online and I saw websites that were cataloging toys I'd never heard of. And these websites became almost like these were beacons in the community where everyone knew these websites because they contained toys that no one had ever seen, but suddenly everybody wanted. Of course, these chaps were clever enough to make the websites once they'd completed their collections, so they no longer had any competition.
Well, that's it, yeah. At what point do you hold back and just be like,
you never should. I really don't think you ever should. I have regrets about stuff that I've sold and then tried to buy in the future, and then because this has been brought to the public awareness and people are aware of these toys now, they've become more desirable. People relate to the enthusiasm that you put into what you say about great stuff. And they're like, well, that guy clearly thinks that that's great. Well, I think it's great too. And now I want it. And then they go and find them and desire grows. And I stepped back into the hobby years later and tried to find the things that I had in the past and was utterly outraged of how much they were going for. And then was promptly blamed by people for the prices that they had to pay. So that's a thing, but there are so many things that have come out of sharing. You learn stuff yourself, and there are so many items in the fandom now that simply would never have surfaced if it wasn't for websites talking about them. So someone finds something in their loft, and now because we have Google, someone will go and type, what's this toy? Oh, yeah. There's a website about it. Let me talk to that guy. Hey, look, I've got this thing. And when that mentality wasn't particularly widespread, what was going to happen to that toy that was found in the loft?
Yeah. Plus,
was the packaging going to survive? No chance.
I mean, to being realistic about it as well, it's kind of our topic, but this is not fun as an insular hobby, though, is it? So, if you're just doing it, if you're just doing it just to have, the most exclusive room full of plastic that anybody in the world has, then that's not a joyful way to approach. I don't think, anyway. That's not what gives me personally joy. It's the sharing and the talking and all of that kind of stuff. The community. Yes, all right, the toys themselves, but beyond that, the kind of connections that you make and the friends and everything, and all of that kind of package with it is what makes it fun. So, I could see in your case how actually, I don't know, I can imagine that you wouldn't trade one for the other.
No, I found out very quickly that just amassing plastic on shelves was not enough to sustain my interest in this hobby. It had to be something creative, something meaningful, and probably an element of attention seeking too, if I'm completely honest. But there are people who do collect completely privately, no interaction with anyone online. They don't buy things online. They only go to conventions and they buy things at conventions, and they keep their collections totally private and they enjoy them privately. So there are people who can do that. And that's
which I guess is why there's so many things still out there, particularly G1s that are just never we don't even know if they exist or not, or how many, or
and they're still turning up. Every single year I've been in this hobby, something has turned up where everyone has gone, what? That's a thing. So without I dread the day when that no longer happens.
It'll be a sad day for sure. I guess I was going to say as well that I hope that continues to happen into the future, because the other thing about the internet is that now, with everything being revealed in the way it is, in such glossy high definition, multiple pictures of every new toy.
Whose fault is that then?
I wasn't talking about my photography. I was talking about the promo pics that they put out and all of that. I
don't know why Liam's laughing. He's responsible too.
No, it's all Sixo. All Sixo this.
It's all Sixo. Look at that. Gosh. We're the same. We're the same. We're all the same. It's that, metallic filter. But that's another podcast. That's another episode.
I do love the way Maz says that. Like, he's not going around sharing group shots of all these immaculate-looking toys every couple of days. At the minute.
Oh, right? Like, he's not been doing this for years.
Have you not realised that these are recycled pictures that I've been posting for the last 2 years? It's the same photographs. They probably don't even look like that anymore.
I feel like it's some sort of subliminal messaging, like, buy these toys, buy these toys, buy these toys.
He's going to start posting pictures of Bisque soon. I'm surprised you don't do it more often. You talk about him enough. But I was going to say that, now with new reveals and stuff, the thing is, of course, so pick any new toy that's now revealed, and they're instantly everywhere. So the mystery and all of that, there isn't that same kind of intrigue in a funny way. Do you know what I mean? There's not that same kind of, I've got to, research this and find out about it or whatever. So but I also think that it means that things won't slip through the cracks in the same way. You won't get the fourth Decepticon target master or that kind of stuff. Or maybe you will, because they do still sometimes, prototypes and things. But even then, that stuff is often shared now, isn't it? Like, we were going to do this, like Armada Prime, the Generations one.
The cursed toy. There's the toy we need.
I mean, that's probably a grail for a lot of people. And I guess actually, we've kind of, in my head, this discussion was a lot more kind of like a straight line, and we've kind of done it like around the houses. But I was going to say that actually for a lot of people, and it seemed on Twitter as well, that unreleased toys were a grail for many people.
Whether that was something category of grail, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Whether it was a prototype that had never been released and that they considered a grail. I mean, I would say Pink Hot Rod in that category. Do you know what I mean? Things like that we talked about last time. Or, simply stuff that has never been made. I mean, the one that in Masterpiece circles everyone always says is, MP Jazz, which has never been a thing. No indication that it ever will be a thing. There are third-party options, but a lot of people still pine after an official Masterpiece Jazz. So, a lot of people, and that's just one example, of course, but a lot of people seem to be saying, actually, my Grail would be this character done in this way that just doesn't exist. And I think that's really interesting.
That definition of a grail, for example, that could change overnight. That could be announced tomorrow as a completely mainline toy that floods shelves, warms pegs, but those people who wanted it have it. And there's a particular type of satisfaction and happiness and fulfillment that comes with that. And then there's the thing that exists that you simply cannot get. And then one day it happens, and it comes with a completely different taste of satisfaction, a completely different feeling. It's a totally different goal, totally different grail. They're both grails. They just feel completely different.
Yeah,
there is a lot to say about the the character choice now, like you were just saying, because you have that with characters like Thunderclash, where people they really want a Thunderclash, and it's a grail sort of toy. But he's literally only had the one vintage toy, but people are less bothered about that because they want the IDW one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true, actually, yes, and actually people would really like to see that happen. I guess especially with stuff like Rotorstorm happening or what have you, maybe there's some interest there as well, I don't know. But it's interesting, isn't it, just people pining after. I see that comment that I know both of you get as well when you post pictures of old toys, like, let's say a Turbo Master or whatever, and people often, the comment you always get is, go on, do you know what I'm going to say?
Where's Dirge?
Oh, yeah.
Turbo Master.
You get that more than even.
Yeah.
But no, I was going to say we need a new toy of this.
Yes, absolutely.
The common comment, isn't it? We need a new toy of this guy.
Yeah.
You post
and a dinosaur like me is no, you need this one.
What's wrong with the original? Thank you.
As it's crumbling in my hands.
Anyway, kind of back on topic there. I guess it's interesting because we've kind of talked around a few different parameters of what make grails, and they kind of covered off some of the points that I had thought we might touch on, which is things like availability and the way it comes and goes. I did think condition as well. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like for me, particularly with vintage collecting, whether it's G1 or whatever, just finding there are lots of toys that are not hard to find. But finding them in a specific condition, a good condition, is difficult. And that actually makes them achieve Grail status. Even though, you could go out and get them for 10 a penny tomorrow, actually just getting the one. The one I was thinking of is like Battle Trap, for example. Like a G1 Battle Trap is, Maz is nodding
it's got to the point where I actually think that it was never grey. It was just that kind of beigey colour out of the box. Yeah.
all yellowed. But that I guess was the one I thought of, and or like Jetfire is maybe another one for a lot of people. That actually, Jetfire is actually a good one because a lot of people think of Jetfire as a rare toy because of the status of it or whatever.
It's plentiful,
it's actually plentiful. You could get it easily. Do you know what I mean? It's not rare at all. It's just rare to find it in pristine condition. That's all it is. Or maybe not even rare. It's just expensive. But
I think that falls under the category of holy grails, where you're talking about condition versus a figure, but it's just it's under the category of difficult.
Yeah,
so that's definitely what makes it a grail, because it's difficult to achieve this thing.
Yeah, exactly. There's a challenge there to it, definitely. I can think of a few things in my collection which, again, you could get quite easily if you're not fussed about nice looking stickers, or you don't care about the quality of the chrome, or you don't mind a bit of discoloration is often the one, right? Like on those old toys particularly. And that, for me, discoloration is something above a lot of other things that I just do not want. Like I can't accept a bit of yellowing. It's a personal parameter. So that makes it very difficult sometimes to find that stuff, because it's just, all too commonly yellowed. And
it's now no longer just G1 that is afflicted by that. I mean, I think we were talking about Robots in Disguise, Prowl, Car Robots, Mark Alert. That's a toy that is quite often discussed. Magnus, yeah.
Yeah, that's a difficult one to find. But there is the reissue now, but the reissue wasn't perfect either. So there's, that actually. And again, I think someone on Twitter said recently, how difficult is it to find RID Magnus? And I was like, well, really not. Like, go on eBay, there's like dozens of them, but the trick is finding one where the tires haven't rotted away, or whatever. That's the problem. And even if you get a sealed one, it could be rubbish. Do you know what I mean? It could be just awful. So it's that to me is I kind of like that in a way, but I also hate it. So
it's not a fun thing. I mean, me trying to get a reissue Ultra Magnus G1 from the year 2001 has been amazing, because I remember. Do you remember I wrote to the online store that had it in stock, and I said to them, could you tell me if this toy is discolored? Has it got the way they phrase it in Japan is sunburned sometimes? So has it discolored? Is it gone yellow? And the answer I got was no. The toy has no yellowing, but it might have some yellowing.
Yeah, I remember you.
So that's just like, that's not a risk I'm taking. I've already had to send one back to you because it was not wet. So.
Schrodinger's Magnus, that is.
Exactly. Precisely.
It is both perfect and not perfect in the box there. But yeah, it's a good example, and that's mad because that's a reissue as well. That's not even like the vintage original. That's a 2001 reissue of a toy. So that's where we got to now. Is that the 1986 toy is one thing. And then you think, okay, well, it's been reissued, but the reissue has taken on this status as well.
I have a whiter vintage Magnus than most of the reissue Magnuses. I have a whiter vintage Macross Strike Valkyrie than the reissue standing next to it, which is already yellowed from 18 years later.
Mad, isn't it? Yeah. It's bizarre. I think my Masterpiece Star Saber has yellowed.
My Masterpiece Prowl
not a very
has.
old toy.
Yeah. It's what was that, Liam?
My Masterpiece Prowl on his hands and just on his feet, just a little the little flaps that sort of fold under on the front of his feet. I noticed the other day they're a slightly different white to what they were. So I was looking at pictures that I'd taken in the past, and it was a much brighter white. But it's quite noticeable.
So I think all of that is really interesting, and it kind of plays into the kind of topic at hand of what I was thinking about, of like that condition and whatever else. The other one, of course, is price, and I was just going to say that we've kind of touched on it a couple of times, but there are surely items that are grails just purely on account of what it would take to as the entry price to that figure is just too much, or whatever. There are also toys that I can think of where actually the price shouldn't be that much, but it often is. And I was going to say one of my current grails, I suppose, because I'm having a hard time finding one, is actually Micron Legend Convoy, the Armada Optimus Prime, but specifically the Japanese version. And it's a toy that is, should not be expensive. It's, I have seen them go for minimal cash, but you also see them go for ridiculous sums of money. I'm talking like 500-600 quid, which I would just not. There's no way that I would even
Is that because the generation of people who would have grown up with these toys are now at the age where they're, turning into collectors, and this is sort of enjoying a second lease of life?
Maybe so. Well, I think specifically with that toy because, the more plentiful American version has GPS, so you can get the American version that will break on you inevitably, or you can get the Japanese version that doesn't have that problem. And maybe there's going to be a reissue soon or whatever, but still, I guess the point is you do see it going in Japan regularly, semi-regularly, for decent prices. You've just got to be quick and get it. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing. And thus far, it's eluded me, I suppose. I missed out on one a week or two ago, but I was having lunch with my son, and just obviously that took priority. Do you know what I mean? You just kind of forget all about it. So
I don't know. Liam was just telling us how he was on holiday, and he was still, after that toy. So I think you really need to question your priorities there.
Loch Ness Monster was looking over his shoulder and he missed it. Do you know what I mean?
Not a true fan, Sixo. Not a true fan.
What can I say, mate? What can I say? That's true. But yeah, I thought it was just, price is obviously, I think for a lot of people, maybe what they kind of associate as something achieving Grail status. What do we think?
Oh, definitely. It's that thing where you accept that you can't have this, and you probably won't have it, and that desire will just, endure.
It's aspirational, isn't it? It's you aspire to have it rather than really desperately want it. There's a difference.
Yeah, and I wonder how much that ties into the way maybe some people view themselves. For example, if you say to yourself, I am not the kind of person who will pay X amount for a toy. And then maybe the day comes where you are the kind of person who will pay X amount for your toy. And maybe because that's just, you're older and you've decided that it's okay for you to indulge in that way. Maybe your circumstances are better. I know there's things I've bought last year because I turned 40, and, I think that actually qualifies as a midlife crisis. No joking. You just think to yourself, well, I've reached this age. I've probably been a toy collector longer than I haven't been a toy collector. And I'm 40 now. Am I going to be doing this when I'm 60, when I'm 70? So I probably have less time that I'm going to be involved in collecting left than I've already had. I do kind of want to own this thing, and that can lead you to the next stage, and suddenly it's like you say, it's just a matter of, it's an entry criteria. The toy is always there, it's always been there, you just didn't want to pay what it was worth. So Grail status is, it's almost tied up with your own circumstances and how you view yourself, and what your principles about where this hobby sits in your priorities. And
I can relate to that. I think there's also, for me anyway, has been particularly with some vintage stuff, an element of like, well, it's maybe looking a little bit pricey now, but it's going to be worse. Give it another year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. Like, when are you going to jump on board? Ultimately, if you want to own it, the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get, because this stuff is all going to creep up in terms of desirability, or certainly most of it is. Do you know what I mean? And also sometimes there's the thing of just, you see something at the right moment. Like there's various things. If you kind of look out for one particular item, it's suddenly you just see it, whether it's on eBay or all the various other sources, and it's just it's kind of, it's still expensive, but maybe it's not so expensive as what you'd imagined or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And that just kind of falls into the category of acceptable all of a sudden. So I think it's really interesting, and it definitely does contribute to the kind of Grail status. But I think, as you say,
sometimes the acceptable answer is, I won't have it. And that's not sometimes, it's always okay to just say, that's just not something I'm going to have. And I wonder if that then stops being a Grail, when you suddenly disassociate yourself with it completely, and that even remotest element of possibility becomes, no, I'm definitely not going there. And that's okay. That will no longer be a Grail because I'm not actively after it. It's just, I'm out. I'll appreciate it from a distance. It's a different thing now.
I was going to ask, is that, I had it in my head, is that then still a Grail? Because one thing that we had kind of talked about as for the discussion tonight was, Grails that we think we'll never achieve. And in a sense, are they still Grails? I can name you a handful of figures, that I know I cannot imagine me ever wanting to pay the prices that would be involved, because it's just, that's just not where I'm at. Do you know what I mean? And not something that I would even kind of consider. So is that then still a Grail for me? Do you know what I mean? Is that, I guess, in the sense that if I randomly saw it at, some car boot sale and it was going for a tenner.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Do you know what I mean?
But that's you getting a deal on maybe something that used to be a Grail. I don't know if you can call it a Grail if you're not on the path, if you're not actively after it, because that whole Grail thing is, there's an emotional connection there, isn't there? There's a deep desire. That's why we call something a Grail. It's a very big difference between something unobtainable and something that's a Grail, but also unobtainable. It's like, I really want it, but I can't get it. Otherwise, I can't get it, so I'll just ignore it. Oh, look, it's at the car boot sale today. I've just achieved my Grail. I don't think that's the same thing entirely.
There is part of the hunt involved with it all. I think the kind of the it could be mine, but it's not. And I think you've got to have that kind of relationship with it. Definitely.
Is all of this you talking yourself out of buying G2 protector bots?
Yeah, well, that's a good example. Actually, I hadn't got them on my list, but that I guess that those protector bots. I mean, I would love to have those. Do you know what I mean? And the Stunticons. I just think they are wonderful. I have the breakdown, the G2 breakdown, which of course is the most accessible of all of those. And I guess that could have been considered a sort of Grail of its time. Although I now do have it. But what do they go for now? Like 15, 20, 25,000 dollars?
Yeah, that's true.
It was recently, I can't even remember.
Looking back at what they were selling for in the late 90s between certain collectors, you just look back and think, I wonder if they ever had a clue of how many zeros would be added, a few years down the line. But,
it's absolutely insane. And realistically, what are you going to do with that item once it's in your house? Do you know what I mean? Like what that level of value is just a bit obscene, really, in a funny way. You know what I mean?
I do understand. I think
I get it,
if it won't affect your lifestyle, if nothing is suffering because of it, and this does take a level of dissociation and crazy amounts of privilege and first world problems sort of thinking when you dissociate yourself from the rest of the world and what's going on. For someone who can afford it and it doesn't change anything, there is plenty of enjoyment to be had by owning that. And I can understand that, because while we're not doing it on a $23,500 scale, to somebody, when we do it on a £100 scale, we are exactly that person.
Well, I was going to say, and it is a question of circumstance, and it is a question of your resources or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Because yes, there are people to whom a 30, 40 quid toy is astronomically expensive to them. Do you know what I mean? And that obviously it kind of changes over time or whatever else. So yeah, it is all circumstance and whatever else. So maybe you're right. I just when I said that some things are unattainable, I wasn't even going near like 25 grand. You know, that wasn't kind of what I had in my head, of course. But that is just an absolute extreme that is just so rare, so niche, but does actually pop up. I mean, it's not actually that you couldn't get hold of them. In the last 2 years, I've seen, I think, a couple of auctions for either the Stunticons or Protector bots. Do you know what I mean? Every time. So it's not like they're not there.
But do they sell, or is it because it's the sort of thing where there's such a finite amount of them that they just hold their price, even if nobody buys them, they just maintain their value, or do they actually sell?
Yeah, good question. I don't know.
Now and then they do. I mean, there was, of course, I think there's not a single collector interview I have conducted where I ask someone, what's the most outrageous story you've heard? And they talk about the G2 Menasor that was bought for 5 figures. The one that didn't have the Menasor head.
Yeah. And
it was pitched as the only one. But I'll tell you what's terrifying is how you can work yourself up the ladder from a £50 purchase to breaking that barrier of becoming someone who pays 3 figures for certain toys. And there's a different feeling about paying 3 figures for a vintage toy and then suddenly being someone who pays 3 figures for a toy that came out yesterday and is considered mainstream. Yeah. And then, maybe multiple hundreds, high hundreds for the rarest version of the thing that you need to complete your already kind of expensive set. And then there's that entirely other step where you suddenly realize you're someone who has spent 4 figures on a toy and you ask yourself, well, how did I get here? But it's possible for people to just follow that path. It just depends on, what they collect, what it means to them, who they want to be.
Well, that's it. I suppose, to get to the point of particularly, I mean, certainly 4 figures, but certainly 5 figures, you're you've got to be pretty invested already, right? Like, you're not just going to wake up one morning, having no toy collection and be like, oh, G2 Protector pods. It's not. That's not how it happens.
And then there are people who do that
like that someday.
Yeah. Some people will do that. They don't collect Transformers, but there is a desire to own the rarest thing in a particular toy line. But they're still toy collectors. But there will be people who own the rarest thing possible from that line, and it's almost like a museum. It's just the kind of things they have.
Well, I was just going to say, I know I kind of referred to like the pink hot rod earlier, which of course I know we talked about it last time that you've had that in hand as well. But that, to me, certainly I could see being like a Grail item. Like, it's just one of those that if that would be a lovely thing to own. Do you know what I mean? To kind of have. So yeah, I think there is an element around kind of niche, unreleased prototype stuff, all of that, that kind of contributed to the story in some way. Kind of the Unicron, for example.
Yeah, Unicron. Unicron is its own thing, isn't it? Yeah. And even the new one's pretty super expensive. I don't think I've even paid that in one drop for a vintage figure ever. The price of a Unicron, and it's amazing how people's it's like the perception that I would be a vintage collector who collects rarities from the past and weird countries. You would probably assume that I regularly pay amounts like that. It's simply not true, and I've never paid that amount for a single figure.
Kind of crazy. I think for a lot of people, it's going to be a watershed moment. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be like a oh, hang on, am I? Is this just like a little dabble for me, or is this like I'm actually in this? As a collector, like I'm willing to put that down.
That's a heck of a Grail, though, isn't it? A G1 styled Unicron, as close as you can get to scale and still house it, and transform the thing.
I was just going to say, I think it maybe fulfills a lot of the criteria of Grail for a lot of people, though, doesn't it? Even though it's a new toy, it's a character that people have wanted to see done for the longest time. And all right, there have been other versions, the Armada one, and then the various retools of that. There's been the third-party one done, fine. But actually, the scale of this thing, and I would say that the look of the planet mode especially, is such that is very desirable for a lot of people. It's just the kind of significance of that character and everything it kind of represents. The planet.
Completely understandable, I think. It's perfect for that one-off big purchase.
It's something special, isn't it? It's got that vibe to it. Something special.
And it doesn't need to fit into a line. It doesn't need to complete a shelf, all of that kind of stuff. So.
No, it is the shelf. It's the whole collection. But just on that one super expensive figure, imagine somebody who collects car robots or robots in disguise from 2001. Is it fair to say that you could probably complete that entire line on a very sensible budget? But then if that line was the thing that you love the most, eventually you're going to want the black Superfire Convoy.
Which is on my list. That's on my list, the black, the lucky draw Superfire Convoy, which, maybe a lot of people don't even know about. But there are others. I mean, there are levels. There is a Magnus. There's the clear ones as well. Mm-hmm. But even the Sam's Club ones, the yellow universe and the kind of slightly different Magnus, which I have, a lot of people would tell you that is a Grail for them. Mm-hmm. So there's levels of of this stuff, isn't there? Because I mean, look, I can never imagine that I will own the black Superfire Convoy. I
can believe that you will, because I've seen people who don't spend that kind of money and have collected this line. But then, because also the thing is, it doesn't just happen to be the Grail one; it's also fantastic looking.
It's
whereas
superb.
With Final Tech, you've got the one not lucky draw, but like a super rare version, BT-17 Black Convoy, and there are so many Final Tech collectors who just are missing that one, and that would be a Grail. But eventually, one day, they might just buy it to complete the collection, and it's the one-off purchase.
I think it's interesting what you say about RID specifically, or car robots, whichever one you go with, because yes, so much of it is accessible, and then there's just a couple of bits. There's just a couple of bits on the periphery that are just very, very difficult to find for one reason or another. Do you know what I mean? And it's because a lot of that stuff, you can pick up for $20 sealed. It's plentiful. You go on eBay, and the vast majority of RID stuff, you could collect if you had that kind of money. You could collect it all in one day. But yes, you'd be left with a couple of significant holes, let's say. So yeah, I think that's a hugely interesting point. And it was on my list. I was going to mention a couple of other bits as well. Like there's the gold, blue, and red Beast Wars Convoy as well. I don't know if you've. I'm sure you've seen those. The Optimus Primal. Neither of you are particular Beast Wars fans, so
no, that's definitely a blind spot. That's definitely a blind spot. But I can respect it. And
there's a lot of Beast Wars stuff and a lot of that era of stuff that was, lucky draw or super rare that has never really even been photographed. So there are pictures of it, but they're like very small and blurry, so you can barely make it out. And actually, the three Optimuses, the gold, blue, and red, fall into that category. I think there's one of them, I can't remember which one, has been seen online. But then, recently with a couple of like the Generations book and a few other publications have started to put out some of the like coloring competition repaints that have been done of certain figures. And some of it is just, it's mind-blowing.
Terrific. I love that there can still be things like that. Do you remember when alternators was a thing? There was a Japanese, I don't remember if it was a TV company or a media company. They did a version of Alternators Prowl in the red box, in the big red Alternators box. And it was the Acura version. It was the Hasbro version of it. And on the side, it said Satellite Patrol. And it was done as a promotion through a Japanese, that was it, a telecommunications company in Japan. You had to sign up with a contract with them, almost like getting like a phone contract in the UK or something like that. And you would get that figure. And I remember the promo figure for that. And that's probably missing from 99.9% of all Alternators collections. I don't think I've ever seen one in hand. I'm not even sure it got made or it got released. But that was such an obscure one. And it was just for that promotion. And of course, there's that incredible pink, blue RX-8 Mazda Vinyl Tech that was that the colors were selected by the Japanese actress, and that was auctioned on Yahoo Japan for I think it was orphans of car accidents, and that was that was bought by collectors. Yeah,
wow,
and that's a one-off.
I didn't even know about that.
It's stunning. It's amazing that you got this one BT-8 Meister Jazz in these pink and blue colors. That was a super special item, and that was advertised as such, and it was a public auction, and there's just one of them, and it exists somewhere, and everyone who has a Vinyl Tech collection can't have it.
Only one copy, just in the world.
Just the one off.
That really is like Grail, holy Grail status, isn't it? That's like
definitive Grail status, isn't it?
But I just have a feeling it will come up for sale. It will come up for sale.
Indiana Jones is going to look for that one.
Yeah. It'll just be on Yahoo Japan. I know it. That's the kind of thing that will appear on Yahoo Japan for sale one day.
And I guess that's so kind of indicative of a lot of this Grail stuff, isn't it? That when it pops up, you've just got to be on the internet at the right time, don't you? It's just so much of it is about the window.
At the right point in your life. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And just, if you miss it, well, that's it. You know what I mean? You can eat regret. And that's all you get. Well, I'm happy to give you a couple of mine. I mean, just because I've kind of mentioned a few of them. And I mean, I've already said, Micron Legend Convoy is one that currently is sort of eluding me. It's not a rare toy. It's, I've already talked about it. It's perfectly achievable. It's just that, I haven't as yet been able to kind of seal the deal. So that's definitely one for me. There's a couple of things that I would say fall into the doable category that I would love to have, but have always it's never been the right time or whatever. So like, a G1 Grandus for me would be, chef's kiss. I would absolutely love to own that thing. I have, I have Sky Gary. I have the reissue of Star Convoy, so I'm all set on that regard. Just the old big boy Grandus, magnificent full chap that he is, the chunky old chap. So that would be wonderful. I mean, you see the Brave one pop up, semi-regularly, and that's always kind of tempted me slightly. But
is that duck
face? Yeah, I would always know in my heart of hearts that it wasn't the one with Transformers on the box. So that would definitely be something. And it's not a toy that you see pop up all that often, but when you do, it's kind of the double whammy of it is expensive and it's often overpriced, but it's also hugely yellowed. Like it's just when they do pop up, it's just in horrendous condition, and it's not it's not really one that it's not a toy that you want to be buying to kind of try and fix. Do you know what I mean? You just want it.
No. And it's funny how Japanese Transformers of that particular era, not necessarily earlier years, but of that era of 89, 90, 91, the white plastic is nearly always gone.
Yeah.
Well, it's I guess in terms of rarity as well, it's end of the line stuff again. It's what Liam said earlier, isn't it? Because all of that,
it's definitely a thing.
Return of Convoy and whatever else, it's when, because it was like the last line of Transformers, it was kind of at the end of it all. People just weren't paying attention to that stuff, and that's why you see stuff like Guard City and whatever. I know that's Operation Combination, but it's all stuff that actually really shouldn't. Guard City shouldn't be as expensive as it is. Do you know what I mean? It has no business being that way, but it's sort of taken on this kind of legendary status. So.
People have said that about Stepper and Artfire for years. For as long as I can remember, people have always said these were mass-release toys, widely available at the time. They should not be as expensive as they are.
It's true, and they're repaints as well. Do you know? I mean, let's not forget. I mean, these are toys. I mean, if you collect G1, you're going to own a Defensor or a Bruticus, probably. Do you know what I mean? You're going to own an Inferno, probably. So the fact that actually these are some of the rarest examples or the most difficult to find is kind of a bit mad.
Well, I told you last time out, just add a Target Master and that's it. You got a winner. Sorry, Sixo, did you finish yours?
Was that pretty much. I was just going to say Raiden was going to be
one. Nice.
Do you think they're going to reissue that? Because they keep marketing something, don't they? There's a lot of speculation about it being a masterpiece, but I think a reissue.
I think it's pretty much confirmed that they are going to do a masterpiece. I think that's a thing that's been confirmed for what everybody kind of makes out anyway. But I think there is some speculation about a G1 reissue as well, which I'd love. I'd be well up for that. I'd be very happy if they.
Brilliant.
I'm really happy if they reissued that. And
I think I'd definitely prefer that over a over a masterpiece would be to experience that vintage toy.
Why not both? .gif. Bring it all on. Train boys, love it. Right, go Liam.
Yeah, well, my current Grails they're kind of mundane because I'm kind of at that age now where I've moved past all of the toys that I desperately wanted. I've kind of got them. Sort of like Swoop and stuff like that, and so now it's stuff like like Anime Blue Streak, the E-Hobby one where he's done like the cartoon. Because there's just something really beautiful about that toy, and I've always wanted to own. Like the Blue Streak is another Holy Grail, but that's one I'll never own. But the anime one is quite, I don't know, it's not that difficult to obtain, but it's still in a price bracket that I don't really feel comfortable paying at the moment. Not because it's not like something like it's well out of my price range. It's more just I can't justify it so much because it's not something I want that badly at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the desirability has to be there to match the price. It has to be equal. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, if you don't really, I think everybody, if they're going to buy something that is a fairly high ticket item, you have to question, do I really want this? Otherwise, don't do it. You know what I mean? Quite simply, why?
Like when I see your photos of it, it's like, God, I really want that toy and I really regret not buying it. But at the same time, I look at it and go, I don't really want to pay £100 plus for it at the moment. That might change in a couple of years or down the line. But it just doesn't feel in that sort of Grail range yet, if that makes sense. It's not like a Holy Grail. It's just like a toy I really want.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Yeah. And no others majorly at the moment?
Oh, no. I'd quite like Fortress Maximus, because you guys always talk about it. And one with a non-apologetic
I still haven't transformed it.
I can see it in the corner. It's taunting me.
It's still in its box. I had to put it back in its box when I moved rooms. And it's still in there.
It's a toy I've never experienced, ever.
Get an evening to yourself, but whilst you've still got them, and then just shut yourself in a room with Fort Max, turn your phone off, and just go crazy. Honestly, you'll thank me for it later.
You are almost describing what we're doing right here, which is like take an evening, shut yourself in a room with Fort Max.
You're talking to us, numpties, honestly.
Yeah,
and I do have to add Galaxy Shuttle as well. I've always wanted that toy. Since I discovered its existence, it's just beautiful. And it's a toy. I don't understand why they don't reissue it. It's that.
It is classic G1 goodness.
I think there's an element of trust with it as well, because every time I see them, they're always yellowed. And when I see a white one, I start to think, has somebody whitened it? It's like I was looking at a Thunderclash today, and it said it was vintage, untouched or whatever, but it's got no stickers on it at all. and it's really bright white. And I just couldn't help but look at it and think, I don't know if they've whitened it, and I just don't have that.
Oh, not even factory stickers?
No, nothing. Everything was stripped.
Ooh, that's
but now I have that element of suspicion with stuff like this.
Yeah, it's true. That's a very serious fact of collecting nowadays.
So, and for purely nostalgic purposes, I've got to get these two in, is Omega Supreme and Mirage, because I've never owned either.
Oh, we must fix.
But like with Mirage,
definitely.
Mirage is the last toy, the one that I wanted as a kid that I've never been able to get, because I think by the time I got into Transformers 85, 86, he wasn't on the shelves, and I've never actually owned one. And he's always broken.
Was he in Gold Box? He wasn't, was he,
No.
Mirage? No.
No.
I was trying to think for a minute.
It's funny because there was a 90s Mirage in China. So they started to produce G1 toys in Chinese factories, completely licensed. Those are the ones that you see with the really short box copyright on the back, just really short text under the tech spec compared to the slightly longer. They typically have like blocked out copyrights, so it just says Hasbro. But yeah, so like countries like Portugal would have received G1 boxed Mirages in the late 80s, early 90s. In G1 boxes, exactly the same, just with a sticker on the side saying it was distributed in Portugal. And no, we didn't get it in Gold Box, even though it was being produced by Hasbro factories at the time.
That's insane, isn't it?
And with Omega Supreme, I saw. Do you remember the converters? I think it's converters, the grandstand sort of different color release.
Yeah.
And I saw
Omegatron,
I saw one at a car boot, and because I think it was black gold, and red. And I remember like umming and ahhing over it, and then running to get the money for it, and I came back and it had gone. And that's the closest I've ever actually come to owning one, and that was as a kid. And
I'd be up for that. If I saw one, going, that for me would be an in-hand purchase. It's not something I would seek out necessarily, but if I saw it there and then, it's a fun thing for sure. So, would you get? I was just gonna say, would you go Encore Omega or not so much?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to have any Omega. It's just, again, it's another one where I've seen it and I've had the money for it, but it's just not, taking myself to the point to actually buy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's like it was on my list to get at TFN this year and last year, and we know how that's worked out.
That's a real thing, actually. Having the Grail and the stars aligning, you having the money for it, which doesn't belong to another priority at that moment in time, and then actually pulling the trigger. Completely different things.
You get into a zone with it, though, don't you? Like, you get used to it being just sort of out of reach, and you move on to other toys that feel like more of a priority.
Yeah. And then you end up spending as much on them as you could have just spent on the one that you wanted,
So has anyone ever done that thing where, as you sort of said, you have the money, you have the opportunity, the Grail is there, you can order it, you can just go ahead, and something just stops you, and you just kind of go,
yeah, absolutely.
No, I won't do that, and then you leave it, and then it's gone.
Yeah,
and that's that.
Never to be seen at that price again.
Yeah,
Generation 1 Sandstorm. This actually happened to me as a child. Is that I really coveted that toy, and for weeks and weeks and weeks, I kept begging my grandma to buy it, and she refused. And then the one week she relented, we went to get it, and I got to the toy shop, and I had this little moment of doubt when I was looking around, like, I've got to make this count, and I bought something else, and I've always regretted it because I cannot remember what else I got. So it can't have been that interesting, and I've never owned a G1 Sandstorm. But I remember the very instant regret, like on the bus back.
Dude,
that's on you, mate. That's just on you.
I know. I'm famously indecisive, and there we were.
Maz is going to hate this, but put Sandstorm above Mirage, in my opinion. Honestly, like Sandstorm is, it's just a beautiful toy. I think personally, it's a favorite.
Make it hard to like you sometimes. Wow, Jesus. The thing is, though, Sandstorm is fantastic. One of the best triple changes. Three killer
one of the best G1 toys, I think.
It really is fantastic.
Because the distinction is all three modes are superb, first of all. So all three modes are excellent, which doesn't happen with every triple changer.
Right.
Does not. But also, all three modes are entirely distinct from one another.
Yeah.
So there are, the helicopter comes out of nowhere. Do you know what I mean? So you can see, man lies down and becomes car. That's sort of the classic, transformation. But this then flips round and stuff comes out of nowhere to form helicopter, and it's like, whoa, what happened there? And
it's not car with rotor blades, Springer.
Exactly. Springer is a lame duck by comparison. Let me tell you. Like I like Springer a lot. The G1 toy, is fine. It's a nice toy, but Sandstorm blows it out of the water. Honestly, I remember seeing Sandstorm. I didn't have it as a kid, but I remember a friend from school did, and I remember the experience of being that blown away by it as a kid, and then having to own it as an adult and just not being disappointed. It's
supremely distinct, memorable, excellent G1 Transformer.
I don't think there's a week that's gone by in the last sort of 30 years where adult Liam hasn't wished he could quantum leap back in time and just say to childhood Liam, look, Ziggy says, I've only got a few seconds, but do not buy whatever crap toy you were going to buy. Buy this. It'll change your life. The rest of your life will be so much better. I go back and think that's the one wrong choice I made that set in motion everything else that's ever happened to me.
Butterfly effect.
Exactly, yes.
But can I just chuck in one more really quickly?
Yeah,
I know I've said a lot, but so on Twitter, I did say that there was one that no one would ever possibly guess. And it's the Transformers Collectors Club Astrotrain. I don't know if you ever saw this. From 2007. It's the, the Armada Jetfire repainted in Astrotrain colours.
Yeah. Huge toy.
Yeah. And a really cool, weird looking toy. And I love that mold, but I would love to get it in those colours.
That mold was the first time, you know what I'm going to say, the first time I met you in person at TFN, whatever year it was. And it wasn't that long ago, but I remember turning up and recognizing you from pictures and stuff. And I remember coming over to you in the bar and just being like, oh, Liam, hey, we're all over there and what have you. And I think you'd already had a couple of pints by that point. But
that's one way of putting it.
Yeah. And you I said, oh, have you already bought something? And you kind of like held up this plastic bag and you were like, yeah, someone just kind of gave this to me, but I don't really know what it is. And it was Armada Jetfire, and was it Optimus in there as well?
It was.
And
it was.
And you were a bit kind of dumbstruck by it all, just like I don't know what's going on with this. It was all very funny.
I think it was an impulse purchase, right at the end of the dealer room, because I was only there for the day, and I was so drunk, and I was just like, just buy something, and there were just these two giant toys. I was like, they look like fun. I'm assuming that's what happened anyway. I don't really have much recollection of that part.
That's the TFN experience there.
Yeah, you said it.
I just remember you all had these like really exciting toys like Galaxy Meteor and all this sort of stuff all around the desk. And then there's me with these two Armada toys that I didn't even know what they were.
I remember that year distinctly. I went home from that TF Nation really bummed that I didn't buy anything that was remotely like what everyone else had found. I had held off so much from buying things. I think I went home with a mini bot or just like a reissue something. And I remember that feeling of just, you're at this convention, just it's okay to go a little bit mad and buy stuff that is more expensive than it is online, or, enjoy the experience, immerse yourself in it, and join in, basically participate. And I'm not saying everyone who attends these shows needs to splash the cash to be a part of it. But when you know inside that that's kind of part of the enjoyment for you, and then you deny yourself at the time, I made that mistake that year, and I remember the year after, I certainly made up for it.
Yeah, I do. I agree with that. I can identify with that. I do think there is still an element of being careful as well, because there is definitely stuff there that is just overpriced. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that dealer room the lighting in there doesn't really properly exhibit like, oh, this toy is great. You take it outside, it's yellow.
M.A.S.K, have you got some that you still don't have?
Yeah, I have to apologize because some of these are extraordinarily niche, because there is stuff that I consider mundane, but I've really struggled to get. Like I've actually had a really hard time trying to find a G1 Springer in great condition. I've really struggled with that one. So that, I guess, I don't know if I would call it a grail because it wasn't on my waking thought. It's not the kind of thing that would ever push something else down my priority list. So, I could see a good Springer tomorrow and then something else I really like, but buy the other thing. I could be Liam as a kid and not buy Sandstorm. But the things that I would drop everything for, the number 3 on my list is a European Diaclone powered Convoy. And that's my favorite line of toys is the European release of Diaclone and Microman toys by a company called Seiji Justra. And they were released in mainland Europe and just various spots in Europe. They've even turned up in the United Arab Emirates, which is just completely amazing. But so there was the Diaclone colored Ultra Magnus was released. I mean, it was released in Japan, it was released in Italy, and also it was released in beautiful packaging in Europe with totally exclusive comic style artwork, where one entire side of this box was this amazing scene of Diaclone Ultra Magnus as a truck, driving through the desert, dust being kicked up, and then the robot mode. I mean, I guess you could say it was almost in the style of G2 Transformers Marvel comic, that totally over-the-top, explosive guns, big, massive grimace on this robot's face, very undiaclone. But that toy, I mean, I think I've seen 7 of them now in that packaging in the years that have gone past, and I've missed it every time. Just I've never been the highest bidder. I've been too slow. I decided eventually I lost out on one. I mean, you could go 5-6 years and not see this toy for sale. And then it came up.
I seem to recall you saw one not so long ago, didn't you? I think you were looking at one.
Yeah. I saw one, and it was kind of like crazy expensive. I don't even know if it was for sale, but it's the kind of toy that people who can afford it buy multiples to have as trade fodder. So if you lose out to one person, your chances are you'll lose out to them again next time if you're not willing to break that barrier and pay obscene money. But yeah, that Diaclone powered Convoy, which is Diaclone Ultra Magnus, in that Juicera box is still very much part of my wish list. And I remember actually I'd secured one, and I was gonna buy it, agreed a price with someone, and this was in the most destroyed box you can imagine. But at the time, that was the best that was available. It was like, it doesn't matter how bad it is, it's proof that it exists.
And with that, in that case, it really is about the box as well, isn't it?
Totally. I've owned the toy. I've owned the toy before, but it is the box. And I would buy the empty box.
Yeah.
So that's on there. Number 2 on my list was the Diaclone version of Wheeljack, but not the normal green-red colors that we come to know, but the Marlboro colors. So that was released in 1984. Possibly
what people now think of as exhaust, right?
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And that would have been on shelves in Japan right next to Transformers. So you would have Takara Transformers, you'd have Takara Diaclone. And I think when that's the case, so many fewer people are going to be buying Diaclones. And it's just one of those end-of-line things where it probably didn't sell so well. So they're very hard to come by now. I remember seeing it for the first time with its completely different head sculpt and really famous red and white Marlboro racing colors, and I've grown up on Formula One. I love those old McLarens with the Marlboro livery. So this was like the fusion of 2 massive hobbies of mine. And that toy has always been like unobtainably expensive. I remember first joining the online fandom in 2002 and learning about Diaclone there. There was one guy who had one, and he kept being told by people that that's a fake. It's not a real toy. Until people realized, no, this is an actual official Takara toy. And he sold it loose on eBay in 2003 or 2002 for $988 back then.
Wow.
Loose. Wow. Stickers applied. So you can imagine it's not entirely crazy that they now go for $2,500, $4,000 boxed and unused. But there were case finds of this toy. It actually got to the point where there was, I can't remember what year it was, maybe 2003. There was a case find in Japan, and the dude who found the case was just putting them out one by one on Yahoo Japan week after week. So the price had come down to $300 for a totally case fresh Marlboro Diaclone Wheeljack. And I was second high bidder twice. And both times, I just thought, I'll just get the next one. My friends got one that were collecting at the same time, and then there was just no more. And that was it. They were done. And I never got, that was the moment that I would have got it. And ever since, I've just always been like 2 or 3 financial tiers below what that toy would cost. Yeah. So that's one maybe one day I'll get lucky, and I'll find a cheap one. I mean, some dude on eBay a few years ago listed it for $250. He just had it from back in the day. He goes, here's a toy, says Diaclone on it, looks like a Transformer, $250. And it was just insta-bought by somebody.
Yeah. It's remarkable, isn't it, when that stuff pops up in the hands of someone that doesn't even really particularly appreciate what they have. They might know that it's kind of rare or whatever, but they don't, the significance of it or whatever else.
You mean like the old man and woman who lived approximately 10 minutes walk from my flat in London, who happened to have a Transformers stepper, G1 stepper, that they bought their son in Japan back in 1987, and it'd never been opened. You mean like that?
Really?
It's so funny when this stuff crops up and it's people that just have it from childhood, and that's an interesting one. There was a guy, I can't remember who it was. There was a guy I was chatting with online recently. I say recently, probably a year or two ago now. But he was sharing some pictures of his collection and Transformers, and I've got some old ones, and he shared a picture, and there was all the usual suspects, that you might see in a G1 childhood Transformers collection, and then randomly there's Blue Bacchus, just there,
yeah, that does happen.
Mint and like looking very nice and whatever else, and I was like, and I thought, should I say something or not? And I was like, well, yeah, you've got to, don't you? That's the thing. And I said, you may not be aware, but actually that one toy can go for 4 figures. Do you know what I mean? Quite comfortably. And he was, I don't know, almost a bit nonplussed. He was kind of like, oh, well, I'm not selling it, so that's fine. Do you know what I mean? And it was just, I think it's interesting when that stuff that, you've never seen it in hand, you've only ever known it as being horrifically expensive online, and then actually you sort of forget that people grew up with that. Do you know what I mean? People had that as their,
it was a child's toy.
Exactly, because they're kids' toys. That's what they are.
And it's quite nice to see them used once in a while, and not just completely pristine, unused in the hands of collectors. But that
AFA or whatever,
right?
It's like,
that stepper though, it links to a story that Liam was telling earlier. So I could literally look out of my window and see where those people lived. I've been walking past that stepper for nearly 30 years going to school, because it was next to my primary and secondary school, and it was just there the whole time. And so I saw that it was listed on eBay, and I saw where they were located, and I got their phone number off eBay, because you can do that. It's not entirely creepy. And I called them up and I said, I'm actually local and I'm really interested in this item. I go, that's really, that's great. This is a toy that we bought our son in Japan in the 80s, and it's just been in our loft and we're clearing stuff out. And this is a Transformer car robot, and we decided to put it on eBay. And I said to the lady, would you be willing to sell that to me directly? And I'll just come and pick it up. And she said to me, oh, no, Maz, no, I'm as straight as an arrow. If I've listed it on eBay, I'm going to let it run. I wouldn't possibly end it. And I just thought, you couldn't have been the lady with the weird wolf. No, you had to be the one with the stepper. And now, and so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to bid. I think it's still extremely well hidden. I'm going to give this a go. And I was on holiday in summer. I think it was in Cape Verde, sitting around the lobby, trying to get Wi-Fi, like, please Wi-Fi work, when this auction was ending. And I didn't get it. I was just outbid at the end. But the thing is, it was one of those where, like, I'm bidding more than I would ever have probably paid for this toy. I've never really coveted a stepper like that. I've had the reissue, but this was just like, I need to own it because it's been in my backyard for 30 plus years. And,
that's mad.
That's the Northland. That's the Crouch End stepper, and I want it. But
I can definitely say your story is far more tragic than my Sandstorm story.
No, I think the Sandstorm story is way worse.
I was actually surprised to hear, Liam, that there was a Transformers toy that your grandmother didn't buy you.
I didn't want to go there, but I was
whenever
thinking
we hear about her, it's like, my gran bought me that one, and whatever. It sounds like quite the gravy train. That does.
When I was saying it, I was like, "Oh, is this going to be?"
You didn't get a bit like
Sixo's Butler.
Yeah, no Scorponok and no Sandstorm.
No. There we go. See, I was a poor child. I had nothing. Just
Very
all the other
right.
ones nobody wanted.
I've got my number one left on the list.
Go on.
So the number one toy, and quite a shameful story attached to this one. I don't know if I'm quite ready to share all the details, but it's it's a European Diaclone Seiji Justra version of Sunstreaker, and this is a toy that has only appeared in its packaging once in all of my knowledge of this hobby, and everyone I've ever known, ever met in the world. This has only popped up for auction once, and that was in December 2016. And I saw this auction, and there was a friend of mine who also collects the same line as me, this Diaclone line. And we both saw it. It was like, what are we going to do about this? You need it. I need it. Probably never going to see it again. And it was totally unused. It's absolutely pristine Sunstreaker. And the box has a red Sunstreaker on the artwork. The toy is yellow. I mean, I love those kind of discrepancies. So we both decided to bid for it. And we had this whole on-running conversation about, well, what's your maximum bid? We shouldn't bid against each other because we're just going to push the price astronomical.
Yeah.
And so we had this agreement about where one of us would go to with the bid. And I actually went as far as speaking to someone who said, look, I know you really want that, so why don't I buy it for you? And the guy actually gave me his eBay login details. He's that good a friend. He's just like, you pay whatever it takes to get this, and then you can take as long as you need to pay me back for it, however long it takes. But I want you to have that.
That's amazing.
And it was amazing and quite terrifying, actually. And so I went to bid for it, and I will not reveal the bid amount because it is obscene. And I was saying to you that I had never paid 600 quid for anything. This is just on a different scale of expense. And it was purely because he decided he was going to bid, and I decided I was going to bid, and both of us just thought, you know what? It's once in a lifetime, every man for himself. And we went for it. And I think we must have pushed the price so high that everyone else was out of it. And he got the bid in at the end, and he won for just an obscene amount of money. And it was such an obscene amount of money that it turned him off collecting. Wow. He'd owned it for a month or so, and he just said to me, do you know what? I've got this toy. I've got no joy because I paid so much for it, and I had to beat you to get it. And I just don't feel any joy attached to this purchase. And it's actually kind of soured him on his whole collecting because he realized that all the remaining pieces that we had were probably going to go this way. And the mad thing is there are now people who collect those Diaclones that pay more than I ever would have done. So I see this as completely unobtainable now. But I'm looking forward to the day when I find someone who bought that in a secondhand store in West Croydon in London and has just had it. And that kind of stuff does happen. And it happened to me this week with another Diaclone. Some dude just contacted me on my website, my ancient crumbling website, and said, hey, I'm in my 60s. I've been collecting robot toys for decades. Here's one that I see you've talked about and is on your wants list. Do you want it? I just want a fair price before I go to Facebook and eBay. And it was a toy that only one other example exists in the world, and I've got it. So now I have both examples of this figure. So it can happen, and I still dream. I can't even look at pictures of that Sunstreaker. It hurts too much, and that's a ridiculous thing for a grown man to say. The grown man who has a job and a family, and but I can't look at pictures of that toy. My desire for it is so deep that that Justra Diaclone Sunstreaker is so far ahead, number one, that I had no competition for that spot.
Yeah, this whole story really kind of puts everything that you and I were going to say into some perspective there, Liam, doesn't it? I don't know how you follow up with that now. Do you know what I mean? But that really is
so many of my Diaclone collection came at great prices. I collected a bunch of them when no one else cared, so there wasn't a lot of competition. Many of them came from sources which were just unbelievable. Like you couldn't write that stuff. Like super rare Series 2 Diaclones I have from this line. There was a woman in Poland who had bought them for her son on holiday in the 80s, and she still had them lying around, and she'd seen them on my website and just said, I'll sell these to you, 50 euros each.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Wow.
Yes, so...
But sometimes it's those really weird specific circumstances, isn't it, that just kind of align. It's what we were saying earlier, and it's just, something that seems like it would never happen, suddenly it becomes possible. And
it's because of the connections you make, isn't it? Like we were talking about earlier with the community and stuff. You make these connections, you put stuff out there, and someone sees it, and it's and they think of you.
Yeah, and I know I've certainly sold things to people that really knock down prices way below market value because I just felt that was the person who deserved it. I don't claim to deserve these things at all. I think that's a terrible attitude to have. But I just know that these possibilities exist. And one day, it just didn't feel right to win it on eBay. It just didn't seem at all consistent with the rest of my collection to suddenly go and blow an obscene amount of money on something that I would then be paying back for years through selling other things and whatnot. It just would never have felt right to have paid that much for it. I'm kind of glad I never won it, but I'm desperately sad that it didn't end up in my collection. But I know one day I'll find one in a charity shop in South London or North London, probably Crouch End again, and it'll just be like, oh, because apparently these toys were sold in stores where you wouldn't get normal Transformers. They weren't allowed to be stocked in places like Toys R Us, Argos, Hamleys. They wouldn't have been in those shops. They would have been in like corner shops, places where they had really weird thing like a sewing kit, maybe some weird art, and then a little collection of toys, and there was some Diaclone. In the UK, certainly it was like that. So I will find them one day. I'm
think
sure of it.
I think that's a good example of like a limit with a Grail, though, isn't it? It's supposed to be fun. Like you realize, like collecting the stuff you buy, it's a source of joy, isn't it? It's something you enjoy and love. And sort of when you get into competing with friends, it becomes like a rivalry, and you end up with a little bit of bitterness and stuff over something.
Okay.
Yeah, and it
Exactly
just paints
right.
it, doesn't it? Like you say, you've spent too much, and you sort of you look at something, and it's no longer the source of joy that you wanted it for.
Yeah.
I think the moment you feel that sense of obligation with this hobby,
Right.
step
to
away.
complete
Do you know what I mean?
something,
You know, temporarily or whatever, but just don't go there just for that sense of obligation. Whether it, just for the sake of it, it's not worth it.
No, exactly right.
Big or small, financially.
And there will always be more. It might take another 10 years, but there'll be more. And
But I mean, especially, even on the level that you're talking about, Maz, where some of this stuff is like, almost unheard of or what have you. But
the outer limits of collecting.
Yeah, exactly. But especially with a lot of the other stuff that we're talking about today, where we're talking about, many of the other examples that are not necessarily rare toys. And that is, I think, what you have to keep in mind is like, it's okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can be sad that I missed on a Micron Legend Convoy, but there's, there will be more. There'll probably be another one in the next couple of weeks. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing. It's not, you just have to wait sometimes and just be that little bit patient. That's all it is.
Exactly. And you'll probably get it for less than what you missed it for on that occasion. And
this one auction, the final price, I am kicking myself a bit because the final price was just peanuts. Do you know what I mean? Really, really peanuts. To the point where I'm like, I don't know if that'll happen again. And now, of course, you kind of get that thing where you kind of resent the idea that you might have to pay more than the one that what it went for there. Do you know what I mean? So that's always kind of. But this is the way it goes sometimes. Isn't it?
That's a wind up, isn't it? When you miss out on something like a Grail, and it goes for the amount you still would have paid because you've been bidding on eBay, and you've missed out on it, even though you would have paid that much.
It's the knowledge that you could have got it for that, and now you're probably going to have to pay a little bit more. That's kind of that's not fun.
And it can sometimes colour your perception of the value, where you think, I could have had it for this much, so I'm definitely never going to pay more than that because I know it's possible.
We now return to the Transformers.
So what are some of the holy grails that we have been able to track down then? Just like a couple of examples off the top of your head or whatever that you can think of toys that you desperately wanted and now have in your collection.
G1 Swoop.
Hey, that's a good one.
Good shout. I'm sure that is on many, many people's lists.
Yeah, it was on mine.
I did touch on the story in the last episode, but I did used to drag my grandma around shops and get the assistants to check in the back to see if they had Swoop when they had the other Dinobots on the shelf. And so for years, that was the one toy. That was the holy grail of everything. And I finally got it 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, I think putting it into context that toy wasn't available in the UK as well, typically. Do you know what I mean? That which probably actually, like, I know it sounds silly, but sometimes you speak to people in America or wherever else and they're like, oh, you actually couldn't get that? And you're like, no, it just wasn't a thing. Do you know what I mean? So it is different.
It's not like now where you could just buy it off the internet. So Star Convoy as well. But that's like a different level of Grail. That was one of the first toys that I saw when I got into collecting as an adult. So when I first sort of became aware of Transformers on the internet as such, it was one of the very first things I saw was this whole era of Transformers I had never known or knew anything about. And it was just this brand new Optimus Prime. Because Power Master Optimus Prime is my favorite Transformers toy ever. Probably my favorite toy ever. And so seeing something that's different, but in a similar sort of style, it's that big, giant, chunky toy. And I finally got that this year from some lovely friends for a birthday gift.
Nice.
So thanks, guys.
What a good group of guys.
I know some absolutely lovely people.
Maris, how about you?
Well, I have to mention this one. When I first started collecting as an adult, the Grail for me was a G1 Ramjet because I just missed the opportunity to get it in stores when it was stocked. And I loved the G1 jets, and I had 4 of them: Thrust, Thundercracker, Starscream, and Dirge. My cousin had Skywarp, so I felt like that was in the circle, even though he never let me play with it. Still don't have it. He still has it somewhere. He won't let me have it. And Ramjet was the one I really wanted. And I loved the only VHS episodes I had were Megatron's Master Plan and Desertion of the Dinobots. And the Coneheads were starting to be featured more, and I loved those Coneheads. So getting a Ramjet from Digital Toys in 1998 or 1999 was magical. And I pestered that guy so much to the point where I had emailed him from my home address and I emailed him from my university address. And he was responding to my university address saying, no, I've sold it to someone else. And me going home, absolutely heartbroken, and to find out he'd actually sold it to my other address. So it was mine. That ramjet was definitely a Grail moment. Got a ramjet. More recently,
that's a cool toy.
It is a gorgeous toy. Still stands up. And I've definitely overcompensated ramjet-wise in my collecting since then. I think I've had every single version of that toy from every country and manufacturer possible in G1. I even had that Sandstorm-colored, hand-painted desert G2 ramjet prototype. That's
you had
the
that?
level to, yeah, just the level to which it went.
Yeah, the pictures that you see of it online, because obviously it's come up with the Generation Selects version of it. The pictures that you see of it online are Maz's.
Are they? I never ever knew that.
Often, yeah.
And it's lovely to see that the Generation Select version uses the color scheme of that hand-painted mock-up, not the final colors of what that release toy was meant to look like, which were far more dull. But it actually has the camo and the teeth. I would love to own that Generation Select Sandstorm. But yeah, then after that was Great Shot, the Japanese G1 exclusive retool of Six Shot for Victory. And I think it was 1989. Victory was 89.
Hang on.
Yeah.
You've never owned that?
No, I have it. That's one that I have bought.
Oh, sorry.
After years.
Sorry, my brain went backwards in time then.
No, I do have it, and I finally got an opportunity to buy it a few years ago, and it was at a time where I wasn't collecting G1. I think I was mostly collecting things like Animated and Masterpiece, and it was like, well, do I really want to buy a toy that's no longer articulated or particularly screen accurate? I mean, do I really want to go back to that part of my collecting? Am I even going to really feel this the way I would have done 10 years ago? And it was such a good price. I couldn't say no. And my friend was selling it to me. And when I got it in hand, it just reminded me of everything I loved about G1 and why I'd coveted this toy. It was just an absolute stunner in hand. And it still is a total stunner. White, red, blue, black, massive gold phoenix on his chest. It's just, oh, what a toy!
I was blown away by it as well when I got it. I got it not so long ago, and I think I particularly love it because it's one of those where it's like familiar but not familiar. Do you know what I mean? It's. I mean, whether you've owned Six Shot or not, there is a kind of.
I haven't.
It's the thing with Great Shot and Six Shot is that they've got all of the kind of classic G1 tropes. They've got the kind of chunky feel to them. They've got the kind of the classic points of articulation, the shoulders. They've got that signature look, all the right angles. The color scheme on Six Shot is classic Decepticon. So even if you've never had a Six Shot, there's an immediate feeling of familiarity, I think, with that toy. And so it was with me with Great Shot, but there's all the kind of there's like the new animal head and things like that. That's all kind of to be discovered. It's the
rhino head is super nice. The flying rhino.
Yeah, bizarre.
It has a lovely Autobot head sculpt as well with two flip out horns. So it's just these little extra touches, and it just elevates that toy. It was already superb to handle to something completely different.
I love how different the two of them feel in hand.
Yeah.
They're two, same mold, but just a couple of little tweaks that just make it, very, very new. So yeah. No,
and what a lovely toy to handle as well. Great weight, great feel, super fun to transform. Really, really amazing display piece and supremely tall. Like really stands out.
Massive. And actually for a 6-mode thing, holds up pretty well. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of multiple
reasonably distinct.
Yeah. There are one or two that are like, less successful. But actually, what I do love about, I wrote about Six Shot recently and said this, was what I do love is that every mode has a piece of molding or engineering or something that is distinct, which I think is super cool. So even like the gun mode, which could just be a bit fan modey or whatever, it's got a little trigger. Do you know what I mean? That is not used in any other mode or anything like that. And I think that is super cool. There's a little touch, like the tank with the little cockpit that folds out. That is only used for the tank, and that I think is super clever. And I would say that on some more modern toys, they don't always go to that level. Do you know what I mean? Of trying to convince you by putting in specific engineering just for one. Like if you had a new toy now that has 6 modes, they may not go to the same level of, the same distance.
It's an extremely good point, and I'd never noticed that. Very, very nice to know that. Wow.
It's honestly, you cycle through the modes. There's something in every mode that feels unique. That is like, this is only there for that one mode. And that for me is real. Like, it's still a children's toy and it's still simple in its way, but there's a level of kind of artistry there, like thinking through it, that I fully appreciate. That makes me love that toy all the more. So
it's a toy that doesn't disappoint at all.
Definitely.
And I spent years looking forward to that toy, and it was just not a disappointment at all.
Well, you're
still,
go on. I was going to say, you're still after a six-shot now, though, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm still trying to find a vintage six-shot in really, really nice condition with good stickers, because the stickers are always so wonky on that toy.
Yeah. It was mad that I was just... You may not forgive me for mentioning this, but do you remember that time I was in that dude's house and he had one?
I often think back to that guy and think maybe I should just contact him and bite the bullet and pay what he was asking.
Maybe. I don't have his details.
Who is this
anymore,
guy?
But, some random dude. I just long story short,
random dude's house.
Yeah,
I broke in.
But more on that later.
A hunch. I've been staring through his windows for weeks and just thought, well, let's get in there. No, it was really random. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was years and years and years ago. Well, not years and years, but it was a good few years ago now. But basically, I had, I think, agreed to buy. I think it was a gold carded aerial bot or something from him or something. Do you know what I mean? Like something fairly insignificant. Yeah. And he'd said, "Oh, I've got more." All of this, and it turned out that actually he lived very, very close. Do you know what I mean? Like within sort of 20 minutes away or something.
Didn't you get your Target Master Scourge and Slugslinger from him as well?
I did. Not Slugslinger, but Scourge, yes. I'm trying to think what else. I think there were two other things I got from him. But I went round and he had all of this stuff, like some incredible things, mint as anything, and he didn't know what any of it. I don't say he didn't know what it was worth, but he hadn't looked into it. Do you know what I mean? I think he was aware that it was not. You're not just going to say like, "I'd give us a $5 for it" or whatever. But like with Scourge, I mean, without a doubt, I could have paid a lot more than I did. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And Six Shot, he didn't really have a price in mind. I remember he was kind of umming and ahhing a bit, but it was not to be on that particular day. I think I remember messaging you, just being like, "Oh my god, there's like I'm stood here looking at this thing. Do you know what I mean? Do you want to get in on this?" But it didn't pan out.
Do you want to get in on this guy's house?
Yeah.
Come around, we'll start a party.
It was a nice bloke. So, but yeah, just someone that had bought this stuff over the years and just kind of amassed it, and then suddenly was looking to part ways with it all. So, as does happen. So
it is cool when you find people from outside of the sort of community, almost just random people who also have loads of Transformers and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got to mention my biggest Grail that I spent years looking for this. It felt like years, and it was at a time when I bought this, and I bought it more than once, but I no longer have it. Any of them. It was the Diaclone yellow version of Sideswipe. When I joined the Diaclone groups online, I mean, I stopped buying G1 at that point. Like, there's so many bread and butter G1 I've never owned because I've never owned a Menasor properly because I stopped buying that stuff and started buying Diaclone because I love the cars, and these were all like you said, familiar but unfamiliar. Like, can you imagine G1 Sideswipe, but in yellow? And it's amazing. And this was basically an unknown variant to most people. They weren't around. You could spend hours, months, weeks looking eBay, Yahoo Japan, secondhand. No one had one. They just weren't around. They weren't popular. They weren't well sold. They weren't even produced in big numbers, I think. And it was right back end of the Diaclone line when they already had agreed with Hasbro to make Transformers. So these things were just on the shelf at the same time, just like the Marlboro version of Wheeljack. Yeah. This toy was impossible to find. And I remember pining after it. Every single photo of it I could find online, I saved on my hard drive. And I knew people who owned it who simply wouldn't part with it. It felt like I needed to talk to people in Japan to see if there was anyone there who knew where one existed. I mean, it was to that degree. I mean, they are so much easier to get today. I see them on eBay every now and then, but at that time, it was supremely difficult to find this toy. And then one popped up on Yahoo Japan. I couldn't pay what it was going for. A friend of mine bought it, and I was like, lucky bugger. And then someone randomly in Canada said, well, I've actually got two of them. Do you want my loose one? And I will never forget the joy of receiving that loose yellow Sideswipe in the mail. Something's like 6:30 in the morning when post Postman still came at that time. And I was standing in my kitchen where I'd opened it, and it was just like, this was incredible. I couldn't believe I'd found that toy. Yeah. And then I bought my friend's one. He decided to leave the hobby, and he sold me his unused one. And I had that for a while. Then I sold that on, and then again I bought another unused one. But then Tiger Track came out, and
I was going to say
that was good enough for me when I decided to sell my vintage toys back in 2003. Yeah. Tiger Track was good enough, and it's good enough today.
How much do you wish they'd done they'd produced the G2 sideswipe with the sort of like deck, the different decker, not the black one, the other one they were going to do?
I owned that as well, Liam.
You owned that one as well?
Yeah, the hand-painted yellow one with the blue back and the blue face. You're supposed to have like the sunset colours on the doors. Yeah, I owned that.
Did you just like the TF wiki with the unproduced prototype page?
Those are probably my pictures, yeah. And the pink and green Mirage, that was mine too.
There's going to be a little running theme on this when you talk about rare prototypes. For most people, they're like, "Oh man, imagine having that in hand." And Maz will just be like, "Yeah, no, I had that actually once."
It was remarkable, that sideswipe. It was so beautiful in those colours.
It looks it.
So like, yeah. I know some of the ones you've had, but I didn't realise you had that one as well.
Hey, don't trash the place. Transformers Generation 2 will be right back after these messages.
Okay, well, some of my Grails achieved, as it were, ticked off Grails. I'm going to run through. What my first one actually is nothing like some of the stuff we've been talking about. It's not like definitely not a rare toy in any sense at all. But it is, I actually have it here. It is Transmetal 2 Megatron. Which actually, a lot of people, Beast Wars, obviously. And look at you both rolling your eyes like, oh, God, it's Beast Wars.
I think we both just glazed over, didn't we, Maz?
No, I'll be completely honest. That is a stunning-looking toy.
It's a fantastic toy. And it's a funny one because it's not rare by any means. I mean, this is plentiful. It's a plentiful toy. It's out there. You can get it sealed, no problem. Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely fine. But I just never had it. So, and back in the day when Beast Wars was new, I had virtually, let's say a decent collection. But it was just one that I never got. And then I did have Cryotech, which was the blue Robots in Disguise repaint.
I remember you picking that up at the pub. Didn't you get that off someone at the pub?
No, I sold it in the pub.
Oh, right.
That was yeah.
That's another thing that happened in the pub.
Sold it to a man in the pub.
Toy sales, yeah.
Do you want to buy a watch?
Yeah. It was me that brought it to the pub, and I went home without it. That was, I sold it to one of our friends who went home with it. So I had that toy for years, and it was still, it was still in immaculate condition and whatever. And I love the blue one. I love Crytek. I actually have Crytek again now because that's really not a rare toy at all.
Sixo, is that the toy you're talking about? Is that the one that Fans Hobby did the Red Dragon of it?
Yes. Yeah. It is. Yes.
Drop dead gorgeous.
Yeah.
I completely understand because that Fans Hobby version was it was insanely nice. So
it's also, so with this thing, actually, it was an interesting one because for years I sort of had in the back of my mind, I'd love to own that one day, even though I know the mold. There's something about the red coloring. I like dragons anyway. I think that dragons are very, very cool. And there's something about the kind of look of that red dragon. It was very cool in the cartoon. So I guess in my back of my head, I always been like one day. But because it's one of those weird ones where you could just do it at any point, you don't. Do you know what I mean? And so I think what eventually convinced me actually was the third-party one that's just come out. But it's a very, very cool third-party toy. Extremely massive and ridiculous and spiky and whatever else, but it's a highly cartoon accurate take. And there's also been as well one by Perfect Effect, Mega Duragan, which is very, very cool as well. And I think owning a third party version of that and thinking this is so amazing, like I love it, like this toy, really kind of spurred me into thinking, okay, actually now's the time I want the original as well. And I'm so happy with it. Honestly, I just absolutely love it. So it's, just one of those that you always kind of think one day, but finally ticked it off. And I guess the other one would be a bit like you, Liam, just Fort Max, really. Just, never owning that as a child and just being... I think last episode I told you my playground story, from school, about the kid with the Fort Max head, just always being in awe of that as a toy. And it's kind of an obvious one, I guess, but it's just... that toy always sticks in my head as just... I think it's one now that even though I own it, it's still one that I look at and kind of giggle a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Just because it's such a thing. It's such a thing. It's just it's immense. What can you say?
And you have to do the whole "is my child taller than Fort Max" thing.
Oh yeah.
At some point, anyone with kids has to do that whole stand them next to each other, take a photo. Who's bigger? One of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I know that for a long time, I had great fun realizing that actually my son's clothes were about the right size for the Mega Supreme. No body's way too big now, but at the time, that was a fun day of discovery. It's going to be great.
You have reminded me of another obtained Grail, which was actually a big deal for me for years. That was Car Robots JRX, the Team Shinkansen rail racer. Years I coveted that toy.
Amazing looking toy.
Yeah, it is everything I hoped it would be. And I've owned it more than once, and I've sold it more than once, obviously. And now I'm sitting here thinking...
You sold it to me. If you look behind me, rather, into the cabinets, you'll be able to see it just there somewhere.
I'm glad that's where it is. But I now realise that I need it again. So I'm going to have to fix that.
If Hasbro can reissue like Beast Wars, Rats and Cats and stuff, they can give us a reissue of JRX next.
That is an amazing name for that line. Rats and Cats. Yep, Transformers, Rats and Cats.
And stuff.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
And pigs.
Yeah.
It's the new Rescue Bot season, isn't
it? Rats and Cats. I do love that.
That's brilliant.
Transformers, Rats.
He's got to drop something every episode. It was apologetic rap last time. This time it's Rats and Cats. Oh, it's amazing.
I've got to contribute somewhere.
Fantastic. Rats and Cats. The level of appreciation for Beast Wars in general on this show is sadly
it's a gift that just keeps on giving. It's a gift that keeps on giving.
Beast Wars is a huge... I don't need to defend it. Do you know what I mean?
Neither should you. Because before I watched it, I was of the position that, this is ridiculous and I don't like this. Now, I've watched that cartoon. And I love that cartoon. And this is with affection.
Yeah, okay.
I've always quite liked it. I've been quite indifferent to it at times, but never hated it or disliked it. It's just,
I remember discovering that you didn't like Beast Wars and being like, what? Do you know what I mean? Someone it doesn't like Beast, but it does make sense. I get the reasoning.
But everybody says that because of the dinosaurs. They're always, how do you not like it because of the dinosaurs? But
I think that was it for me. But actually, your reasoning really makes sense. That kind of it was more the style of it than anything. So, which I can appreciate. So
it's very unfortunate, but I like the idea of it more than it itself.
Yeah, I've been reading the new IDW Beast Wars comic actually, which is really really good. So
was it good?
Neither of you will read it, so but you can take my word for it that it is.
Hey, how long did I try to get you to read More Than Meets the Eye?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%, 100%. So,
and can I just shatter your illusions there because I've actually bought it.
Ooh, well done!
Fantastic. My little tablet device there. I just haven't read it. I've got like a backlog of that and IDW,
purchase.
Whatever it is, the G1 version 2 or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, it's been a good long while since I've bought a comic and thought I'm going to read that, and I thought, I'll give it a go.
Should we do one quick round and just quick fire of because we did have another category, didn't we? Which was one completely unobtainable, impossible holy grail that you never expect to get.
Yeah.
Shoot, go on, man.
Oh god, I keep talking about these stupid niche toys, but the Japanese Diaclone powered Convoy DX set. That's the one with the Diaclone colored Magnus, the black and blue sideswipe, and the red Diaclone Mirage.
Oh, nice.
I remember when a friend of mine bought that for $1,500 in 2002, and I thought he was totally insane. He then sold it for $12,000. Some years later, and now auctions are going for $20,000. I'm pretty certain I am never going to own that.
It's off the
but
table,
if I could, Red Mirage. That's unobtainable, but that is top draw for me.
So
that was silver-eared Cyclonus from the Ladybird books. That G1 Cyclonus with the silver ears from the Ladybird books. That's the other one.
The Red Mirage. That was the only release of that.
Only release was in that gift set.
Yeah, I thought so. I was just trying to remember. That would be a cool one for sure. Liam.
Maz, you've touched on this twice. Mine would be movie preview Ultra Magnus.
What a thing.
It's
beautiful.
Oh, when you just look at a toy and as beautiful as the toy is, the colours just come together in a certain way. Like I could just stare at the grey for ages. It's just this really nice plasticky looking grey, and then the blue and the red. It's a beautiful toy. But yeah, you've touched on it twice, and it's
for people listening who maybe don't know the toy that we're talking about. This is what today most people would call Delta Magnus. Because
the
Masterpiece
SD
Delta Magnus is based on that. Yeah,
it's from the trailer, isn't it? From the movie trailer as well, which is where movie.
But Liam, you're talking specifically about the Dakara reissue that was done at the same time as Shining Magnus, right?
That's the one.
The Diaclone colours, but released under Transformers.
I was going to try and pronounce the Japanese name, but I did not want to butcher it.
Yeah, I don't think we need to give that a go. I try and avoid all that kind of stuff as much as
movie
possible.
preview will do.
Yeah, movie preview is fine. It is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. I can't remember what numbers it was limited to now. I'd need to look it up to remind myself. But
I know Shining Magnus was 800.
800.
I think this was probably 1500.
I think that rings a bell. I was going to say it's more than Shining. So, and I remember Shining was 800. So it's definitely 1,000 or over. But
before we started recording, I did actually look it up on eBay, and there isn't one, and I couldn't find one in the sold listings either. So
interesting. Yeah, it's not. It's probably one more for kind of specialist websites or whatever. But it does pop up. It does pop up.
Yeah.
But it's one to. It's a bit like Shining Magnus. It's probably one to get sooner rather than later because it's definitely creeping up.
Yeah. For sure. It's always going to just be more expensive because vintage ones have gone through the roof, and people now who tend to get it hold on to it.
Or one they should just reissue again. It'd be nice.
That would be great. Actually, I would be totally up for that.
Yeah, I would. Well, some of mine are. It's not really a specific figure, but like there's a whole heap of stuff, I should say, from Victory basically that just is never going to be in the sphere of what I want to pay or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's anything like Blue Bacchus, I've already mentioned, Black Shadow, Lao Kaiser, probably that set probably falls into a couple of categories for me. One is price, but two is condition, because you so often see it yellowed or just broken or just not looking very good. And I don't know, it's a bit the same with Go Shooter for me, that like I would love a Master Force Go Shooter, or Minerva even, but you so often see them in terrible condition. Go Shooter is yellowed, Minerva is yellowed and looking terrible. And I don't know, for me, I kind of I don't know if I could do it and then have it not be nice. Do you know what I mean? It just kind of seems like I'd almost rather not. I'd rather not go there than kind of, I don't know, do it not on my own terms, if that sort of makes sense. So, but yeah, those are some for me that just I don't know that it'll ever happen realistically, but have to see, I guess.
We now return to the Transformers.
Right, well, I think that about does it for today. We've had a pretty good session talking about Holy Grails and the whatnot. So big thank you for listening to everybody, and and also worth saying, big thank you for all of the wonderful comments that we've had on episode 1. So if you have tuned in for episode 1, thank you so much, and again, thank you to everybody that's taken time out their day to kind of tell us what they enjoyed and whatever else. If you haven't checked it out yet, of course, it's still available. And thank you if you are following us on social media of some kind as well. We've got over 400 Twitter followers now, which is pretty cool. 400. So that's something,
amazing.
isn't it? So yeah, we're really
Thank you,
quite
everybody.
excited about that. Yeah, the response, has to be said, has been terrific. So we really appreciate that. So speaking of social media, of course, you can find us all on various portals. Maz, where are you?
I am on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under @TFsquareone.
Cool. Liam?
I am on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and anywhere else there's probably an @ and it would be Toybox Soapbox.
Yeah, and I'm on all of the above as well, and YouTube, and that's Sixo TF. So that's I think that's it for us today. So big thank you, gentlemen, for the terrific chat, and thank you to everybody for listening. And you stay classy, San Diego.